Nope. Hey, I'll just get Councillors Cole Hamilton and Morin to turn your cameras and microphones on, or at least your cameras. You don't have to turn your microphone on. Please and thank you, and we'll get going momentarily. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for our April 23rd, 2025 regular council meeting. And I'd like to just start by respectfully acknowledging that the land in which we gather is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And I will pass it over to Councillor Hillian for our first proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, we'd like to take a moment to recognize an important health initiative that affects communities across Canada, including right here in Courtenay. May is Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month. It's a time to remind ourselves and each other about the importance of sun safety. Overexposure to ultraviolet or UV radiation is one of the leading causes of both melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers. In fact, skin cancer is the most common type of cancer in Canada. And research shows that 1 in 6 Canadians born in the 1990s will develop some form of it in their lifetime. And as someone born before the 1990s who has skin cancer, I'm definitely aware of this. And yet many people still seek out the sun without taking proper precautions. What they may not realize is that any change in skin color, including tanning, is a sign of UV damage. We also want to highlight the importance of early detection. Skin examinations should be done monthly because when caught early, skin cancer is often highly treatable. Organizations like the Save Your Skin Foundation are doing vital work to raise awareness and support Canadians in the fight against melanoma, non-melanoma skin cancers, and ocular melanoma through advocacy, education, and outreach. So today, Mayor and Council proclaim May 2025 as Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month here in Courtenay, British Columbia. Let's work together to stay informed, stay protected, and support those affected. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Councillor Hillian, for reading that off today. Much appreciate that, and sending you my best wishes on the skin cancer. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Also wanting to take a moment to acknowledging the ongoing toxic drug crisis. So on behalf of Courtenay Council, I want to acknowledge that April 14th, 2025 marked 9 years since the toxic drug emergency was declared in British Columbia. And since that time, more than 16,000 lives have been lost to unregulated toxic drugs across the province. And what that's meant for us in the Comox Valley, at least from September to December 2024, is that we've lost 6 community members who have died as a result of the toxic drug crisis. And we're wanting to acknowledge that loss to the community and their loved ones, their families, their coworkers and friends. In total, 211 lives have been lost in our region since the declaration of the health emergency in 9 years ago. And we want to just acknowledge that each one of those 211 lives are too many. And this council has continued to advocate for supports to address this crisis. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jolicoeur. Appreciate that. And we'll move into introduction of late items. I haven't been made aware of any. And so we'll move to adoption of our regular council minutes from April 2nd. Any errors or omission? Seeing none, we'll move as unanimous for the council minutes, and we'll move into our first presentation with the RCMP and Inspector Scott Mercer. And I can turn on the microphone there for you. And thank you very much for coming tonight.
Well, thank you, Council, for inviting me here. I'd just like to make several announcements. If you can give me a brief moment before I read into my fourth quarter report as well as our EPP. Since April 1st, we've brought back the Beat Patrol program, in which we've had 3 beat patrols in the downtown area. We've received positive feedback from business owners and the general public on the police visibility, and we have 3 scheduled beat patrol initiatives from now until the end of the summer, in which we have 2 members assigned for each of those 30. On May 2nd, Constable Shannon McQuarrie, who has been with this detachment for over a decade, will be retiring from the RCMP. She is in our Special Victims Unit. She is a fierce advocate for child safety. She is a subject matter expert for our island when it comes to child interviewing. She is also a recent recipient of the King Charles Coronation Medal for her contributions towards making young lives safer when it comes to being victims of a sexual offense, as well as victims of crime. So with a heavy heart, she will be retiring. We're hoping in some capacity she'll be able to return as a reservist with our detachment, because her skill set in terms of interviewing children is unmatched within this island, and she's agreed to come back and help us in that regard. From May 12th to the 16th, our detachment will be hosting Mountie Camp at Goosefit for youth in this area to experience aspects of police training, modeled much after our depot experience for 6 months, but a lot friendlier for kids. It's a great opportunity for them to be exposed to it and to seek out new challenges. So this is largely based on volunteers from our detachment, as well as other community members that participate throughout this entire week. It's well sought after and well attended by our youth, and we're looking forward to hosting that as well. On May 20th, the detachment will be hosting an awards and recognition ceremony at Marine Park in the town of Comox. Amongst the awards that we will be presenting there will be the King Charles Coronation recipients, in which we have 5 people from our detachment: Sergeant Rob Brennan, Corporal Tori Cliff, Constable Shannon McQuarrie, Corporal Matt Holst, and Public Servant Brad Farrell, who are all being awarded with this recognition award. We're going to be having our district officer in attendance, as well as our staff sergeant major. In addition, we will be having other acknowledgements for members that participated in the Wounded Warriors campaign that helped reach their fundraising goal of $50,000 this year, in which they'll be presented with blankets from persons that made these quilts in acknowledgement of persons that are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. If there are members of this council that wish to participate, I will be sending an invitation as well for you to attend if you'd like to come to the ceremonies and show your recognition. In follow to some of our youth initiatives that we're planning this year, we're going to be doing a positive ticket campaign, and we're going to be reaching out to the respective municipalities and business owners to see how they'll like to contribute to that, so that we can reward the positive and good behavior that we see with our youth within our communities. An initiative that was done way back, but now is being brought back to Comox and the city of Courtenay, and we look forward to partnering with the municipalities on that. We're also looking to do a youth bike rodeo and partnering with the Comox First Nations to do that on the Goose Pit on May 31st as well. So depending upon the popularity of that event, we might be able to utilize that in the city of Courtenay as well as the town of Comox too this year. If you'll please council, I will start with my fourth quarter reporting. We saw an 11% decrease from last year's fourth quarter, which was approximately 397 files difference from last year's to this year's fourth quarter. Most common calls were unwanted persons, traffic incidences, and check well-beings. We did see a notable increase in breach files. Approximately 156 files were noted for this year. With the exception of the breach, all other categories had decreased. Most common call locations that we found were the courthouse downtown, and Junction, and the Crown Plaza. Courthouse saw a 192% increase, which was a 75 file difference. The Junction saw a 206% increase, which was a 33 file difference, and the Crown Plaza shopping area saw a 68% increase, which was a 17 file difference. We saw a 41% decrease at the Connect Warming Center in this particular quarter relative to last quarter. I'm sure there will be follow-up questions on that with respect to the fence line in that, if that made any difference in terms of security or calls for service to that area. Again, we're going to keep an eye on it in terms to see the trends from this last quarter to this first quarter for this fiscal year to see if we see a decrease in it again. Over half the calls at the junction were related to unwanted and missing persons and check well-beings, as well as assist EMS and fire. Over half the calls at Crown Isle Shopping Plaza were unwanted persons, thefts, traffic, and check well-beings. We did see that with that notable increase in Crown Plaza, a lot of our files that were generated in there were attributed to youth from that were causing mischief at the McDonald's as well as the Dollarama that was there. Common downtown calls for service that we saw a drop in 17% for calls for service for the downtown area, with a notable increase in breaches, which was approximately 278%, an 89 file difference from last year. We saw a drop in the majority of categories with the exception of breaches. That follows suits with violent crime as well, where we saw a 17% decrease relative to the fourth quarter from the previous year. Most common was assault, harassment, threats, and sex offenses. We saw a rise in extortion to approximately 75%, which while that may be alarming in terms of the percentage, it was a nominal increase of 3 files from the previous year. All other categories under violence also decreased with the exception of extortion, which rose by 75%. Violent crime, as reflected on our heat map, shows most of these calls reported were in the downtown and East Courtenay area, which is consistent with my previous reporting, where it's the more denser areas where we're going to find the most amount of crime and assistance for police that's needed the most. Property crime, we saw a 22% decrease from the previous year. The most common calls for those service was mischief and shoplifting. We did see an increase in break and enter and possession of stolen property, while the percentages again seem large, were 120% and 100% respectively. It was a nominal increase of 6 files per category there from the previous year. For controlled drugs, we saw an 89% increase from the previous year, which was an 8 file difference. Drug possession, 89% increase, which again was an 8 file difference. Drug trafficking was a decrease of 33%, which was a 2 file difference. With respect to traffic, we saw a 50% increase in traffic offenses from the previous year. Most of those were impaired related offenses, in which we're keeping an eye on it. Acknowledging that we have a reduced amount of municipal traffic resources, we still have one of the highest amounts of impaired suspensions on Vancouver Island. So that is my fourth quarter reporting. If there's any questions from council, I'd be happy to answer them.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the report and for the brief before that. All those events sounded quite exciting. I would definitely say anything that you are happy to have an elected official attend, make sure that staff are aware. They'll make sure that we get invited and they can add to our calendars, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So really appreciate that. And I do recall at the last RCMP camp, I probably took too much enjoyment waking kids up at 5 o'clock in the morning with very loud music, but the kids really seem to enjoy it. So really, again, kudos to everybody that makes that happen. It's an amazing program. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Helene.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Inspector Mercer. I'm curious about the breaches, and particularly given that they're happening at the courthouse. It suggests there's a stepped up enforcement, and I'm just wondering if there's any analysis of what exactly is happening and whether the stepped up enforcement bears any relationship to the decreases in other categories of offending.
I fielded the question with my analyst, and she wasn't able to provide any sort of context from it. I could speak anecdotally from when we see a rise in breach of probation or breaches in general when it comes to failure to comply. It's all in relation to timing. is something that I will be reaching out to probation to find out for the stepped up enforcement measures on it. There is something that I should draw some attention to with respect to the fourth quarter reporting. There's about 3 different values that are associated to the courthouse percentage values. The first percentage value speaks to breaches for all of Courtenay. The second percentage value speaks to calls, most common calls in the downtown area, which focuses in on the courthouse. Now, that calls at the courthouse doesn't necessarily translate straight across into breaches. That could also be other administrative offenses like fail to appear at court, which also, depending, we're starting to see an increase in prosecutorial attitude to want to pursue those types of offenses, where in previous years they haven't wanted to do it.
Okay. Yeah, and just if I can interject, thanks for clarifying. So that doesn't involve our CMP workload. That's primarily just a record that those offenses are taking place. So that's probation officers filing breach reports and the Crown dealing with them.
Well, there is still an associated police workload to those. Just because the offenses are sworn and such, there will be a police officer that will likely have to arrest that person. They'll have to process them, be the primary investigator to them. So probation has a hand in that, but when it comes to the actual execution of the warrant itself, there's police work that's associated to that as well.
Yeah, that's assuming the people are getting arrested and not being dealt with in some other way to come to court. The other question I had was in relation to the increase in calls at the junction. We know there's been a change in management there. Does that bear any relation to the increase in requests for police assistance?
I got to be honest with you, up until this report, I didn't really notice through my usual dealings with operations of the detachment that there was a significant increase. This is, again, something that I would have to probably consult with my operations NCO to find out exactly the reasons for it. I just wanted to draw the attention as to the reasons for the calls there, where it was the unwanted and missing persons, the check well-being, and assist EMS. So it could very well be that there's more staff that feel more comfortable calling the police. But yeah, the junction in of itself is relatively a peaceful residences. It's a second, it's supportive housing, if I'm not mistaken, right? So we typically don't get called there for any major incidences. So it might just be that there might have been 1 or 2 residences that were causing problems at one particular point.
Yeah, as a resident of the area, that gives me a sense of well-being. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And next we have Councillor Frisch.
Yes, excuse me. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Inspector, for the report. I had a question about the other communities, Cumberland and Comox, and I realize you probably don't have the numbers in front of you, but are there similar reports for them with decreasing crime in their areas? Is it kind of a similar story all through the valley?
Yes, I can say that there haven't been any alarming statistics that I've had to report to the other municipalities when it comes to a rise in crime. Offhand, I can't think of anything that I would say that it's following suit with a lot of the trends that we're seeing within the Courtenay area. I mean, Courtenay in itself has a greater population density, right? It has, so I mean, the amount of calls for service will be significantly different, say like from the town of Comox or Cumberland, but the actual offenses themselves, we're not seeing a spike in any sort of violence or property crime in the respective areas. They seem to be following the same trends around the area.
Mm-hmm. And up at the Crown Isle Plaza, is that a new scenario where people are finding their way up there looking for?
I think it's displaced youth, to be quite honest. Okay. I think that there was some challenges from some youth that were living in the nearby area, and they found a comfort in going to the shopping plaza there. We have had several incidences that some youth have been challenging the adults that have confronted them on their activities and stuff. We've spent quite a bit of time trying to learn the people that are there, to have conversations with them. Our sole purpose has never been to go straight enforcement. There's obviously an education and awareness that we're trying to teach them, and then work with their parents as well to ensure that this isn't a repeat activity. The amount of calls that we're getting called for there has decreased since that March area, where we're starting to see that ramped up increase, but we're keeping a close eye on it, because again, there's just, I mean, you look at respectively, it's one of the biggest draws is that specific area with all the shopping and stuff, but most of the police assistance that we're seeing is either mischief or theft related.
Sounds fair. Thanks for that.
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. Appreciate that. And online, we have Councillor Moran and Councillor Cole-Hamilton, and we'll start with Councillor Moran.
Thanks, Mayor, and welcome back. Yeah, thank you, Scott, for the report. It's encouraging to be cautiously optimistic about the downward trend that we're seeing. I'm always curious about the youth aspect. I liked what you had to say about the positive ticketing. When I worked in schools, we had something kind of similar called Good Newsgrams, where kids would get these little gift certificates or gift cards if they were caught doing something good. And I remember one young lad who used to get into quite a bit of trouble. When he got one, he was quite in shock, and he said he'd he'd never had any interaction with anyone that had been positive before. So I think those kinds of initiatives definitely can plant some seeds for some folks. So that's great. And so I guess I mean, anecdotally, we've been hearing about some rambunctious young people in all the communities, but it sounds like you don't see this as being um, anything of huge concern. Like I'm hearing about it in Cumberland and in Comox as well. Just it seems like some youth that are kind of persistently causing some issues, but sounds like you've got a handle on it. And are they involved with community justice or anything like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't label it as a concern, but something that was noteworthy when we did our town hall tours to the other communities, youth was identified as a significant priority, whether it was Cumberland and some of the mischief and theft activity that was happening up there, or the town of Comox with the concerns that they have along the waterfront and the shopping plaza downtown. So with that being said, I mean, we would certainly like to roll in youth as one of our priorities this year, with the positive ticket campaign being one, the bike rodeo being another thing, kind of energizing my school resource officer and some of the members within our detachment to come up with creative ideas how we can develop positive working relationships with the youth in our community, as well as utilizing the Community Justice Center for restorative justice measures and giving these kids an opportunity to really understand the impact that their actions might have on other persons before we have to step in any sort of real enforcement capacity.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moran and Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Officer Mercer. I had a different question, but I noticed no one's actually asked yet about the reduction in calls to connect, and that's encouraging trends. And you sound like you might have a few comments on that. Could I ask you to share those, please?
Just with respect to the Connect Center, I mean, with the fence line going up, I've had some conversations with CVTS just to reach out to the Comox Valley Transition Society and learn a little bit more and reestablish a connection and a relationship with them, as well as with this respective municipality too. We understand that there's challenges with the Connect Center. We understand that there is always a draw or a need for police to go over there proactively, and that's what we're trying to do, but not in a negative fashion. We've incorporated our beat patrol program to include proactive presence within the Connect to try and reestablish that connection with people there. We're getting concerning reports with persons that are in this fence line that there is an increase in certain offenses like stolen property that are being brought there, that people are collecting up on debts, and that there's been an increase in violence. We really wanted to introduce ourselves back into that environment and show that, you know, that we're there to help in some way. So we have a really good connection that we've established with the Connect and the CVTS on that, and we're looking to expand on it. With the fence line going up, one thing that was asked of me, I don't know if it was last council session, is if we saw a noticeable effect since that fence had gone up. Has it improved the area in terms of public safety or any sort of calls for service? I can't address the public safety aspect from it, but what I can say is that from the last quarter to this quarter, since the fence has gone up, we've seen a 41% decrease. Now, is that because we're just not getting called there as often as because there's this divide with a physical fence? Is it because people on the outside aren't calling as much for the activities that they're seeing and getting us there? I still think that regardless of the stats show that there's a 41% decrease, I still think that we need to be proactively within that area and in a positive fashion as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's encouraging news, I think, in either way, but it's good to understand a bit more about what causes that reduction in figures. And Mayor, it may have a subsequent.
Yep, there's no one else waiting, so the
Great.
floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much. I wanted to ask about the extortion figures. I noticed they're up again, and you've talked in the past about exactly what that means, and it's preying upon the most vulnerable, like youth in our community. And I was wondering, it's a very specific type of offense. I'm wondering how the detachment deals with that, because it's obviously, I'm sure, a concern to you.
It's a huge concern. It's challenging on a couple of fronts because we have done some education awareness around this. The problem that we're finding is that people feel trapped when they get into these things. They're the individuals that are perpetrating these scams are organized. They're global. They have the means to throw out their lines, and then if nothing gets a snag, they move on to the next one. They're luring people in, whether it's youth, whether it's elderly. They're finding a way to get them into a position where they feel that they can corrupt them, or they can hold something over them to extort them financially. It's really difficult to break through in terms of the awareness aspect of it, but even more so in terms of enforcement, because our detachment is only limited as far as what we can do. And when we're dealing with international schemes and such, we run into issues when it comes to technology platforms, the release of privacy information, and then we're dealing with offenses that are being committed in other countries across the world. So we try to engage with our federal serious organized crime, our specialized units on what we can do, but their thresholds for some of these extortion scams are up in the millions where they get involved, right? So when people are in that gray area where they're being bilked out of, thousands and thousands of dollars, I mean, it's unfortunate that we're not able to do enough in our capacity because we run into so many roadblocks with this. It is something that I have brought back to my detachment to say we need to do something better on how we can better prepare the community, but we also need to give them something more than, I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do for you. Because, outside of being, and we're talking like individuals that lose hundreds of thousands of dollars to this, right? Through real estate scams and stuff like that. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking to see that person's life savings are being drained because they're getting lured into these online scams.
Okay, thanks so much. And it seems like, I mean, often, well, prevention is almost always a better solution than the alternative. But it seems like in this case, given the difficulty of enforcing consequences, that prevention is fundamental. Are there national campaigns or campaigns you're aware of that help to prevent seniors and youth from being
There are, and we
exploited?
try and incorporate that into our awareness campaigns. I think it provides another good opportunity to maybe introduce that this year. I see the reports every week where we're getting multiple frauds like this that are being reported, and we feel helpless in what we're able to do. So, I mean, I think it's a starting point, like you said, to maybe energize the community and get them more aware. Liaising with certain partners when it comes to local banks and such, or senior groups, and get those presentations out and the experts in to teach them what they can do in those situations so they don't get victimized.
Great, thanks. Appreciate the answers.
Fantastic. I don't see any other lights on at this moment for any other. Excellent. Excellent. Any questions on recommendation 1? Just receiving the report, don't see any. So we'll receive that unanimously by council, and then we go to recommendation 2, which might be a bit of a discussion. Councillor Frisch, actually, first.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd be happy to go with the same priorities as last year, and we'll see if anyone around the table wants to add to that.
All right, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation and for being here, Inspector, and for sharing some of the really important updates at the detachments. I appreciate and give our thanks to your member who's retiring. I know that the community, she was well respected in the community. So yeah, in terms of our community priorities, I guess I don't have major concerns around keeping those that we had previously. I guess I had a question, I think last time you were here, around the curiosity around the town of Comox and their priorities. And then around how you feel we've done on the 5 from last year.
Yeah. When Mr. Garbett had approached me as far as the possibility of this, like we have an internal operational document, which is our annual policing plan that we do. There is a potential for me to provide that document for this council to review. It would have to be vetted in a fashion, because when we're talking about other communities that have provided input, obviously there's some internal discussions that are had as far as when we're reporting from quarter to quarter to quarter. With respect, I don't have their consent to release some of that information over, but what I can do is provide some data to show that how we met our measures and our targets for the year with respect to, say, traffic, with respect to violence and property crime and such. So I think there's certainly an opportunity for that. If that would please council, I could look at doing that for so that you can have it, I guess, an idea as far as the efforts that we made. Because when I come here to report, a lot of it is global information that I'm pulling from this, right? So I mean, if it's more satisfactory to provide that document in a vetted fashion, that's something that we can certainly discuss.
Yeah, and if I can, Mayor, just as a follow-up to that, I do see that one of the suggested resolutions is also to have you come back on the outcomes of our annual activities and annual priorities. And I think some of them are a little bit more, I'm kind of tracking similar to Councillor Cole Hamilton around extortion, but from our priorities from last year, traffic, violent crime, property crime, we get that in the quarterly update. So I feel that I have a good grasp on. It's the other two that I've been more curious around, and I recall that we had wanted that prioritized based on the feedback we've been hearing from community. And so, yeah, I think this is an evolving process, and I'm happy to hear that you're open and flexible to ensuring that maybe next year we have more data to use in our analysis around what we should be considering for the upcoming year. And I think the larger question around the town of Comox, Mayor, I think this is a broader conversation we've been having with our colleagues over there in a shared detachment format around ways in which we can find efficiencies at the detachment. So if the town of Comox has completely opposite community priorities as us, I think that we should probably come together as councils perhaps to have a conversation around how best to use the limited resources that we have out of the detachment to address community-wide priorities. And with that, I guess the only, I'll just share a comment. The only concern I have around the 5 from last year, traffic, violent crime, property crime, community relations, and Indigenous relations, is as it relates to extortion. We've seen now, I think every quarter this year, extortion go up. Yeah. And I share similar concerns to Councillor Cole Hamilton. These are the most vulnerable folks in our community, or some of the most vulnerable folks in the community. And so that would be the only other one that I'd suggest we have a conversation around. I don't necessarily have a solution of what I'd like to take off, because we only get 5. But that I think we've seen over the years, over the quarters this year, that has consistently been an increase quarter after quarter. So
if one of your priorities is property crime, it can be rolled into extortion as part of property crime, right? And we can put that caveat on there to say that the city of Courtenay identified extortion as being part of that, and then again incorporate it into our policing plan.
Excellent. I'm getting nods, so that sounds like it's understood. Really appreciate that. And again, later on, hopefully this year, the city of Courtenay will be hosting an RCMP elected officials forum. We'll be able to actually have those conversations to say, Inspector Mercer will be able to speak to all of us at once, and then we'll be able to then talk amongst ourselves as well. So it'll
For
be
sure.
the first time we've done something like this, but I think again, the timing is about right as Comox gets ready to breach the 15,000 number, and Cumberland is also increasing too. So with that, yeah. I was just sorry, I was the things that moved. I just wanted to make sure there's no hands on screen. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, Mercer, I was interested in maybe your thoughts. I guess I had picked up to some degree that you were interested in maybe supporting youth a little more. But is there something else that you think would be worthwhile adding in? And I'll just preface your answer with, for me, it's important that you think that there'll be, reasonable outcomes for more effort into any one of these areas, right? And just wondering if you see an area that maybe we haven't outlined that you could use more attention, and you think you could really do something with that particular area?
Well, one area, and I've had some conversation with Mr. Garbett and through Councillor Jolicoeur is, mental health being an area. Personally, it's something that I feel is representative in all the communities, whether it's Courtenay, Comox, and Cumberland. They've all expressed in some level of concern as far as the increase in persons that are experiencing mental health crisis. Now, I completely respect the fact that our role as police officers should be reduced in that capacity, right? That our role is to, preserve public safety. But I still think that there's value in establishing that as a priority, given the amount of calls for service that we do within this particular area that has a strong mental health connection to it. We're trying to reduce the types of calls for service. And unfortunately for the public, we're the first ones that are called out the door on some of these things because they struggle. They call 911. They don't know who to call. Fire is getting called to it. EMS is getting called to it. In some capacity, our first responders are all being dedicated to going to these types of calls. Is there any way that we can establish in a non-enforcement capacity, how the police can maybe contribute to either depreciating that the number of calls for service that we go that have a mental health connection, whether it's utilizing our civilian groups a little bit more, such as the community response, community-led group, or it's our mental health support unit at the hospital. Branching out and forming better relationships with some of our mental health organizations in town and having meetings and then providing information in terms of some of the trends that we're seeing in the area to help them out, using more proactive referrals, not just in incidences where we're getting called and we see someone that we deal with on a regular basis that's off their baseline, right? We know that they have mental health issues and such, but we may be the only point of contact that someone has with this individual before they go into crisis. So we can make those proactive referrals to CRCL or to the mental health unit, right? And hopefully that will reduce the next call that gets sent to that individual, right? So for me, I'm very passionate about this idea. I've broached the idea of an integrated mental health car. I feel that it would be value added for this community. I just feel that we talk about the issue, but respectively, the police have a reduced role. I still think that we could still establish it as a policing priority within this community, right? There's still room for us to help each other out on this. That would be my recommendation. But again, that doesn't necessarily have to be a recommendation from this council. Other communities have done it. And with our whole policing priorities that we do and we establish, it's not just solely the policing priorities for Courtenay, the policing priorities. It's a combination of all of them, right? It's the challenges that we face with an integrated police force that we have to, find ways of providing meaningful police support to all the communities and not just one, right? So that would be my recommendation, but respectfully, I will go with everything that's been suggested by council here today.
Yeah, well, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but it's hard to imagine anyone on this council not wanting to focus on that. It's if memory serves me correct, we had community policing for years as something we wanted to have pushed forward. That sounds exactly like what you're talking about, a more holistic approach to dealing with issues. If we only get 5, what would you say we could drop off?
I don't think there's nothing saying you only get 5.
Yeah.
If you want to add additionals on there, that's more than fine with us as well.
Well, thanks for your insight.
Yeah, and I think in the past, we've actually combined things as well, so there may be an opportunity for that. I was gonna make a suggestion, but it sounds like Councillor Hillian has one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I would suggest we leave them as they are, but well, we've got including extortion. With police and community relations, I would suggest we add to that, particularly related to mental health and youth issues.
I think that's a great idea.
And if council agrees, I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a comment on that. I really appreciate that because I think we also have groups in this community who are leading this work. And I know that there's kind of been piecemeal representation from the RCMP. I think the Substance Use Collaborative, the Community Action Team, the HRT meeting, and the Coalition to End Homelessness. And so I think that could be a great way to involve your team in understanding the ways in which we can integrate those services. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. I don't see any further lights, so we'll call a question. All those in. Oh, yeah. So just to confirm, I'll just get some nods that this is what everybody thinks that is on the screen, and I believe people in Zoom land can see it. Again, lots of nods. We've got the mover and seconder. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that looked fairly unanimous, and I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Garbett.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, I just want to follow through. We had a councillor asking for some activities related to the next round of reporting. If it'd be good to have a motion in that regard, so it'd be very clear, because we've had quite a number of conversations. The quarterly report document has evolved, as has this conversation around community policing priorities. So if council could, if you want some direction on kind of further to what the ideas Councillor Jolicoeur had, I think it would be important. So then it's clear for the inspector next time he comes back when we discuss community policing priorities. So good.
So recommendation 3, does that cover what you're thinking, or do you think it needs to be articulated a little bit more?
Well, sorry, through the mayor, Councillor Jolicoeur asked some specifics related to the next round of community policing priorities deliberations. Procedurally, I think it'd be important. So then it's clear what council has asked for, and then the inspector will come back and we can have that dialogue. So we established priorities, great, but what I heard from a member of council, and council should deliberate about that, is some specifics when we come back for this next dialogue.
So one thing that I do with the Comox First Nations is when I present my report, I also give them an update on our policing priorities as by quarter and stuff. So that is something that I could probably include in my next presentation as well, to give you an idea as far as where we are in certain measures and initiatives.
Exactly. Since this is the metrics that we're putting forward, getting feedback on those metrics, and I think the challenge has been, I think that question has been sort of asked, but it's just taken a while. So I really appreciate you offering that, because I think that's been that missing piece is we get the numbers, but it's not how do those numbers actually fit in with what we've prioritized, and because of course we don't prioritize why people call you, so which you have to obviously respond to in urgency. So I really appreciate that. Councillor Hillian.
I'd like to move recommendation 3, Mayor. Thanks.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And motion carries. All right. Thanks again very much. Make sure you send all those events out. Many of us enjoy going and hanging out. Again, if there's anything we do for the retirement party, happy to do whatever we can to make it a special occasion. So
thank you.
With that, we'll move on to our next item. Thanks very much. And we'll go on to City of Courtenay Engagement Framework. And I will pass it over to Mr. Garbett.
Thanks, I believe. And Gio, our manager of communications, is going to kick this off. Exciting work, and we have consultants on board to deliver the presentation.
Thank you. Through the city manager to mayor and council. The engagement framework presented to council today aims to enhance resident participation in city decision-making by removing barriers, improving engagement practices, and opportunities for participation. The framework builds on the city's communication strategy which was adopted in January 2024 and provides guidance on our outgoing communication to streamline and enhance clarity and accessibility. Hilary Farson and Zakir Virani from Spur Communication have been steering the development of the engagement framework with the city over the past year. Zakir will be sharing more about the framework with you this afternoon, and he is joined by Natalie Hill from Spur, who is filling in for Hilary for this presentation. So thank you very much. I'll pass it over to Zakir and Natalie.
Thank you so much. To the esteemed council members, thank you so much for having us today. Thank you to our staff partners and Kate and so many others at the city, key collaborators and champions of this project. And we want to thank the other staff who are working hard to bring us our slides and bring us to your screen tonight. Thank you for your support. We also want to say good afternoon to the residents of the city of Courtenay who are watching. The work we'll be describing today is designed to ensure that you can provide meaningful input into the city on issues that matter to you. So your interest in this work is so welcome and so valuable. Next slide, please. So here's the content that Zakir and I will be covering. First, we'll provide some context to set the stage for our discussion. I'll address what a framework is and why the city set out to create one, building off of what you just heard from Anne already. Next, I will recap what we heard in the engagement process. We facilitated this to inform the framework that's been developed. So before we could define best practices and guidelines on how the city engages, of course, first we had to hear from the people of Courtenay on what they need, expect, and are hoping for. So we will recap the data that we gathered and illustrate how what we heard informed the framework itself. Then I'll hand it over to Zakir. He'll provide an overview of the framework. It's a comprehensive document, so we cannot go through it page by page, but he'll highlight the key components. And then we'll talk about next steps, and Zakir and I will both be available for questions at the end. Next slide, thank you. Before I keep going, I will note that Zakir and I are both joining from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. As was mentioned at the top of this meeting, we are also aware that the members of the Comox Nation have recently voted in favor of ratifying both a treaty and a constitution, paving the way for it to become the 9th modern treaty nation in BC. Very significant events that we've been watching closely as partners to the city of Courtenay. And as we will speak to later, our process to developing this framework included engagement on traditional Comox territory and with Indigenous identifying members of the Courtenay community. So I want to express our gratitude for their participation and their insights. We will speak to how the framework considers equitable and meaningful experiences for Indigenous residents. You also might remember this from the last time Hilary would have presented to council, but just as a reminder, you will hear us say interest holder throughout the presentation instead of stakeholder, which is a choice we've made at Spur to ensure our language advances reconciliation as much as possible. Next slide, thank you. So let's talk about the purpose of an engagement framework. Frameworks serve to guide meaningful interactions between council, staff, residents, and interest holder groups. They make it easier and more predictable for the people who are involved in the engagement experience. And more importantly, a strong framework can help ensure that every voice in the city is heard and valued. It creates municipal processes and systems that allow for and facilitate diverse participation. When expectations are clear, which is what a framework helps ensure, and when everyone knows how to contribute and how to participate, we increase people's comfort with and capacity for engaging with the city. You see higher rates of participation, more meaningful participation, and greater satisfaction in those encounters. I'll do the next slide, please. We wanted to identify 4 key components that we think are critical to any framework, whether it's with the city of Courtenay or any other organization that we've supported through this process. The first is inclusivity. A good framework creates systems where projects are designed with accessibility at the forefront. This means you will see varied formats, times, channels, ways for people to participate, recognizing that there is no one size fits all for people's very unique lives. The second component of a good framework is transparency. A good framework should provide clarity into how decisions are made. So it should outline how governments will use public input and feedback in combination with the wealth of other considerations and constraints that we know a city government has to take into account when it makes a decision. Frameworks help guide people who design engagements, help prompt them to be transparent about what decision is being made and how the feedback will be used. Without this transparency, it's really hard to earn trust in an engagement process. The third factor is consistency. So a strong framework will create clear, predictable processes for engaging across projects and across departments, making things easier both for staff within cities and for residents who are experiencing it, being invited and participating. People should have a consistent experience, whether they're weighing in on a park project or a rezoning, and not feel like the rules or the parameters are very different depending on the department or the specific staff people leading the feedback process. And the last piece that's so critical to anything, I think, in life is ongoing learning. A good framework builds in processes for ongoing review, refinement, changes. Communities change over time, and so should the processes and policies that serve them. And even just listening to the presentations before us, hearing about the issues that are emerging in Courtenay, things that are tracking up and up, how demographics are changing. These are the kinds of trends that prompt a city to go back to its strategies and frameworks and ask the question, is this still serving us? What has changed, and how can we adapt our processes to meet modern changing best practices over time? Next slide, thank you. So having said all of this, I will summarize what we heard from the people of Courtenay when we asked them how a new engagement framework could best serve them. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of our engagement process, which started all the way back last spring when we engaged council and staff in May and June. And as was mentioned, my colleague Hilary Farson has presented previously to council on this work when it was midpoint and in flight. And that previous presentation spoke to what we heard from council and from staff. So we won't reiterate the content of that presentation tonight. And I know that that's in the archives for reference. But what we will talk about tonight is what's happened in that timeline from June of last year onward. So interest holder engagement, Indigenous engagement, and an online engagement. So for interest holder groups, I'll just explain that these are segments of the population of Courtenay who have shared experiences or needs. Often these are equity deserving groups, people who face specific barriers or needs in their day-to-day lives, folks like seniors, newcomers, youth, maybe people living with disabilities. These folks also have unique strengths and forms of wisdom. So it's really valuable to hear from them too. And in terms of an overview of how we cast our net, we reached out to 32 community organizations in Courtenay, 4 culture and tourism organizations, 12 environmental and recreational associations, and 12 organizations to advance business interests or health for the people in Courtenay. And ultimately, we hosted 18 folks who were able to participate, representing an array of these organizations, and that happened in June. In terms of Indigenous engagement, in partnership with the city, we reached out to urban Indigenous folks in the city of Courtenay, members of the Métis Nation, Indigenous families who are engaged through the school board. I will say, and importantly, this was not government to government engagement and consultation. That government to government work is happening in parallel to this project. To support the city's Indigenous engagement strategy and reconciliation strategy. That work's being led by Ginger Gosnell-Myers, who we coordinated with and collaborated with on this project. But we did want to delineate these two things and be clear that our Indigenous engagement was for self-identifying Indigenous folks in the community. We hosted seven people from organizations that serve Indigenous residents, and that was in September of 2024. And lastly, for the online engagement, this took place at the end of October and ran into mid-November of last fall. An online survey. We heard from 278 participants, all of whom live or work in the city of Courtenay, encouraged by that participation there. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So let's talk about what we heard from each of these three distinct groups. The first are these interest holders. Again, those people from local organizations that represent seniors, newcomers, people with disabilities. We had a workshop with them, and this is a summary of what we heard from that conversation. So the first is that folks want to be engaged early and often. People need notice ahead of time about what's coming up, what they will be asked to share, when they need to share it, and importantly, why they're being asked to share. Engaging groups like this with intent, clear intent, and transparently committing to them that you will listen and come back to them to ensure they feel heard is vital to ongoing success. So you want to avoid those short notice, quick invitations that make it hard for people to attend. They come, they maybe rearrange their schedules and come. They are generous with their feedback, and then they never hear back again after that. That's the kind of situation that we want to avoid, and what representatives from this organization are saying is important to solve for. The second is to meet people in their space, in their own space at their own speed. So seniors, newcomers, youth, people who are learning English, those folks can find new spaces intimidating, can have various experiences with formal government spaces or institutions or processes that can impact trust along with many of the rest of the population. So going into community where people are already gathering and leveraging the existing programs, the existing meetups that they might have, this is what allows participants to be in familiar settings and participate as they feel comfortable. So if there's already a weekly potluck dinner or a shared community meal happening, go be a part of the meal is what they said. Come to us, we'd love to host you, rather than have us come to your space at a different time of day. Ensure consistency in communication and approach. So this goes back to what I said earlier about a principle of a good framework. This was validated by these interest holder groups who said, yeah, that's important to us too. They want consistent communication from the city across projects, across initiatives, that they'll always know what to expect, and that their experience will be fairly predictable. And again, that line of sight, is there a routine or a schedule that they will always be invited to participate in when it comes time for them to provide their feedback, so that they can plan for it in ahead. Removing cultural and language barriers. Of course, this is so critical that everyone is able to participate in the way that makes them feel most comfortable, and ensuring that their participation is diverse and inclusive as possible. When we have environments that bring people together, we want to reduce barriers as much as possible in order to ensure that representation is there. If people's accessibility needs are not being met, like understanding the language or being able to access the physical space, of course, then it'll be nearly impossible for them to have their voice heard and counted. Safe engagement spaces. People mentioned wanting to use spaces that have spaces and people that have been thoughtfully curated to create as safe an environment as possible. So trained professionals who can provide interpretation, have trauma-informed training, approach their facilitation in a very warm and careful way. Accessibility services like childcare or transit to a venue. This really helps people come into the space and again, remove those barriers. That's what they mentioned would be important to them. And lastly, transparency. So again, going back to decision making, if I come to this event and provide you with my feedback, where is it going to go? Will you tell me how the decision was made in the end? People want to know that that's a promise that will be fulfilled. And if it is, that will go a long way to earning and maintaining trust over time. Next slide, please. So again, we hosted 7 folks who represent and support Indigenous identifying folks in Courtenay and surrounding areas in September of 2024. And these are the key themes from that conversation. In terms of specific barriers to engagement, this was a really important takeaway that we heard, that folks felt there are some misunderstandings about the diversity of the Indigenous populations in Courtenay, shared and different experiences between urban Indigenous people, the local First Nation, other folks with Indigenous heritage. This can create misconceptions and it hinders dialogue. Of course, we also know that systemic issues like racism and the legacies of colonialism, alongside the trauma of self-identification or the politics of identifying as Indigenous in this colonial structure that we operate in, can limit participation by Indigenous folks. People also shared their limited capacity and their resources as key obstacles to meaningful engagement. Just like anyone else in the community, people are stretched for time and space to prioritize something like this in their lives. And anything that can be done to remove those barriers would be welcome. Culturally appropriate engagement came up with this group. There's a desire for it to feel like a culturally appropriate space, like something that isn't transactional or only just about sitting and talking and gathering feedback. And for some people, they named, providing food, having children in this space, having it feel like a whole family experience, transportation to and from, and having the events held within an Indigenous space or adjacent to one. Flexibility in gathering feedback was also recommended. It's not everyone's comfortable participating in an open group setting and verbalizing a response. Multiple channels for feedback was named to ensure everyone can participate in the way that works best for them. Truth and reconciliation came up, of course, and there was an appreciation. There was recognition that the city, folks can see the city's ongoing efforts towards reconciliation, including initiatives like the Reconciliation Table, led by the CVRD, and the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw. They shared that reconciliation should go beyond symbolic gestures and include really meaningful, sustained action over time. Reconciliation is, of course, an evolving process that should reflect the lived realities of Indigenous residents and really start to facilitate concrete change within the community. Relationships. Of course, this came up as being key to ongoing trust and collaboration. These participants named that they hope engagement experiences are grounded in ongoing, well-nurtured, authentic relationships with Indigenous identifying folks in community. They did mention the importance, some folks did, of establishing clear engagement protocols, such as formal relationship agreements or MOUs between City Council and the Comox Nation, which, as mentioned, will be explored separately in a different stream of work. However, once that work is formalized and codified, in other engagement spaces, people would like to see it referenced or acknowledged so that they know what larger formal protocols are being kind of honored in the background to an engagement experience. Capacity building. So these participants noted that they'd hope city staff would undertake training on cultural safety and the unique challenges faced by Indigenous residents, especially those who might be experiencing homelessness or requiring additional support or systemic challenges. Knowing that you're going to an event where folks that are going to lead the conversation will have the tools and training to respond to any situation and handle any particularly difficult conversation has people feeling a little bit safer and more likely to participate. And lastly, acknowledgements. These participants encourage the city to make acknowledgements that are heartfelt and reflective of the diversity of Indigenous peoples, including urban Indigenous populations. They suggested personal connections in how acknowledgements are delivered beyond static, formal, scripted statements into something that might feel more meaningful or authentic from space to space and person to person. Okay, next slide, please. So these are the takeaways from our public survey. Again, this was in the fall of last year with the 278 participants. Key themes from the survey: inclusive and transparent engagement. Again, we're seeing some repetitive themes, but we want to not skip over those to demonstrate when things came up time and time again. Folks said they wanted to ensure all voices, especially those from traditionally marginalized groups, are heard. They want engagement to be accessible and for diverse perspectives to be considered, and that they want to see their feedback being meaningfully reflected in policies and actions taken by the city. This was really interesting, the untapped potential for engagement within the city of Courtenay. Only 1/3 of respondents to the survey had participated in a formal city engagement activity, which we found really surprising. In this context, you might expect the frequent flyers or the usual suspects who participate in every city engagement to take the survey about engagement. But through some, I think, strong promotional efforts and outreach, we got folks that don't normally participate weighing in on this one, which is so great. So you have great potential to draw in new residents in new engagement opportunities as the framework moves forward. By far, the most popular format for engagement that people said they were interested in was online surveys. Of course, we recognize a correlation here that the format here was an online survey, and that's not lost on us. But this is followed closely by other forms of online engagement, like a virtual workshop, public meetings, and community events. And there is a need here we saw to offer this diversity. So it can't just be everything's online or everything's in person. We really heard from different demographics that different formats work for them. And so like most city governments, the city of Courtenay is compelled to consider these various formats to reach as many diverse people as possible. In terms of communication with the city, people mentioned challenges in finding out about engagement opportunities. We hear this a lot. I didn't know this was happening. I wish I had found out sooner. And there's a concern that there's a lack of public awareness about engagement opportunities. So some folks did say, they want more recurring, visible, regular updates when engagements are happening, and also the follow-up. So when was a decision made? What happened? What happened in the end after that engagement occurred? Now, this one is a tough one on influence and transparency. So many participants did express some skepticism that their input has a meaningful impact on decision making. They want to understand how their feedback will be used. And it really highlights the need to provide more information on the spectrum of engagement. So the International Association of Public Participation, or IAP2, is a body that outlines best practices for civic engagement, including a really helpful spectrum that shows, what you might think of as the lightest form of engagement, which is just kind of information out to folks, all the way up to the most significant form of engagement where people are empowered to make binding decisions. So it's important that the city communicate where on the IAP2 spectrum an engagement is taking place, and that's something that we've included in the framework. And the last piece is engagement for all and engagement for everyone. People want as broad a range of opportunities as possible, considering, what's going to really resonate with young people, what's going to really work for working families or people who work on shift work. Some people worried that engagement opportunities can fail to reach people who don't have reliable internet access, people who are working on untraditional hours, or people who are juggling just a few more things on their plate than most people are. And so a little bit of innovation, a little bit of novelty to ensure different folks from different pockets of the community have a chance to participate. That came up in the survey as well. Okay, next slide, please. I want to thank you all for following along with me. I know this is a lot of dense material. I appreciate it. Trust. We really wanted to stop here and just talk about this important point. One of the key themes throughout the engagement process was trust and a lack of trust, and curiosity about how decisions are made at the city. For us, this aligned with the statistically valid resident survey that was presented to council in January previously by a different group. And I want to stress that this is not unique to Courtenay. We work with a lot of local governments. We see distrust growing in communities across BC right now and beyond. And it does beg the question, what do we do about declining trust in government? And how do we pull people into government processes? So there's two things that we wanted to flag. The first is deepening awareness about how decisions are made at the city and the role engagement plays within that process. So in our survey, we asked, how important is it to you that the city of Courtenay provide clear and timely information about its decisions and actions? And almost 80% of respondents noted that this was very important, 79%. And another 16% said it was somewhat important to them. So about 95% of all of your residents are saying this is important. This might warrant some campaigns or some efforts about decision making at the city generally. Even illustrating for people what are all the inputs that council must consider when they make a decision, and making that information accessible and available to people on an ongoing basis, as well as a part of each individual engagement opportunity, so people can see the big picture on where their feedback fits into a bigger wheel of inputs. And the next thing that we wanted to mention here is communicating the level of influence that participants have on any given project. We do suggest referencing IAP2 here. At the beginning of every project, include clear information about where on the spectrum the engagement is falling, what is being asked and why, and what level of influence that feedback will have on the project. This really can go a long way to tackling this trust issue that so many public institutions are grappling with. So we wanted to reinforce those points. Okay, with that, I will spare you all my voice for a while and pass it over to Zakir to speak about the framework itself.
Thank you, Nat. That was a lot of context, but we did intentionally structure the presentation this way because it's important to highlight, as we heard from residents and community groups and other organizations, the bar for doing engagement well is not low. And the constraints and diverse needs that exist to conduct that on behalf of the city can be extensive at times. And so to understand the depth and breadth of good engagement and meeting folks where they are is to necessitate the need for standardization and frameworking of the process so that city resources and city tools and city channels can be leveraged the best way possible to achieve those ends, to create that consistency. And so the framework is also complex, and I want to do my best to distill it into the 8 main areas that the framework addresses. So the first is why we engage. At its heart, this framework is about trust. Engagement isn't just a checkbox. It's how we build relationships and make better decisions. When people are meaningfully involved, outcomes are more inclusive, and policies reflect the lived experiences of the community. So the framework begins by grounding us in this purpose, acknowledging that engagement is central to creating a more responsive, equitable, and inclusive Courtenay. It sets the tone for how we approach collaboration moving forward. The next section is guiding principles, where the framework outlines the principles that will guide every engagement activity. These came directly from what we heard in our engagement from community members, Indigenous partners, staff, and council. The principles include commitments to listening to learn, removing systemic barriers, being transparent about how feedback is used, staying flexible in approach, and valuing relationships, especially with equity-deserving groups and Indigenous communities. These aren't just values on paper, they're how we plan to show up in practice. Then the framework speaks to roles and responsibilities. To help operationalize engagement, we defined roles based on project size, so small, medium, and large. This mirrors the city's communication strategy structure, so it's familiar and ideally easier to apply because of that consistency. For each project size, small, medium, and large, we clarify who's doing what, from departmental leads and communication support to council's own role in championing engagement and building public trust. This brings clarity, consistency, and accountability to engagement work across departments. Fourth area of the framework is engagement planning, where a detailed planning process is provided to make engagement more intentional. It starts with a needs assessment to understand the scope of a given project, who will be impacted by it, and what specific concepts or topics or thoughts are open for input. From there, we define who should be engaged, what level of influence they'll have, and what impacts need to be considered, especially for equity-deserving communities. And this structure helps staff design engagement activities that are purposeful, inclusive, and aligned with city values. We can move to the next slide. I will speak to number 5, which is engagement methods. So we outline the various methods that we'll use for engagement for small, medium, and large projects. And I'll flag here that in defining these engagement methods, we have included a reduced set of tactics. As you know from previous presentations that we've given you, this is designed to build consistency, both for your community and for your staff. So both in terms of what city staff can own and continuously leverage and use, and for the expectations of your residents and your engagement participants for what they expect it means to engage with the city over time. People will increasingly know what to expect when they engage with the city, and we hope that this increase eases and comforts those who might otherwise feel anxious to engage with the city. So you'll see tactics like surveys, focus groups, open houses, one-on-one meetings, pop-up events, and workshops, all there with clear definitions. So we say it's a reduced list, but it is still an extensive one that does offer that variety of ability to meet folks with different levels of access and in different parts of the community. We then outline considerations for conducting equitable engagement. So we speak to the importance of reaching out to equity-deserving groups early and proactively, which reflects that ask that we received from community. We talk about using a trauma-informed approach to engagement, including things like what it means to use empowering language, acknowledge historical trauma, provide flexibility, and protecting people's personal information. And then we speak about Indigenous engagement, and we're careful in this section to speak about engaging Indigenous communities and not about the duty to consult, since that work and work relevant to it is being done alongside the city developing a reconciliation framework. So this part of the engagement framework speaks to and mirrors back requests from the Indigenous individuals and groups, about creating culturally safe spaces, providing multiple avenues for participation, addressing unconscious biases, and addressing historical contexts in healing. Also, in response to requests from the Indigenous workshop we held, we outlined an approach to territorial acknowledgements. The last section of the framework is about feedback and reporting. And in this section, we speak a bit about how to manage quantitative and qualitative data, and then about how equity in analysis of findings is a key part of amplifying voices from equity-deserving communities. Finally, we talk about transparency in reporting, and as part of the framework, you'll also see a template for standardized reporting. And if we can go to the next slide, I can prove to you that we are almost done because we are on number 4 out of 4. And I just want to speak quickly to the next steps in this process. So at this moment, we are in the process of finalizing and developing a suite of templates to expedite engagement projects tied to the shape and needs and outline of the framework. And we have also prepared an updated resourcing dashboard for communications and engagement relevant activities that allows for the ability to map and project required resources and expenditures and needs from the city based on engagements and relevant events in the calendar and the types of communication and engagement needs that those events will have. So we're in the process of refining and finalizing that. And then we will move into working with the city on an implementation strategy, because ultimately this new engagement framework represents the goalposts, the North Star of what good engagement needs to be and what that process needs to look like. And the step in front of us now is to work with the senior leadership team and city departments to define what of that is achievable now, what is achievable near term, and what is achievable midterm. And this is to be aware of the constraints of available resources and to understand where the most impact can be had. And to also look at this from a change management perspective to recognize that it's introducing new systems and structures and processes. And so to work in shaping those and making sure that things like the templates and the framework itself are tuned and adapted to what city staff and departments need them to be so that they can be executed so that the not low bar of good engagement can be hit. And of course, that is always followed by testing and refinement, because the whole point of this is to be dynamic and not static, and ensuring that this is continuously growing better and stronger. I'm a little bit out of breath. Nat might still be out of breath, but we will stop there. We will thank you for taking the time to hear us out and let us walk through this, and we would love to take any questions that you might have.
Fantastic. I appreciate the detailed report to get us to this point. And I'm looking around to see if there's any questions or comments. I don't see any. So, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to highlight, I thought it was a little interesting that in the development of an engagement framework that we had, at least in the invitational one-on-one consultation, not a ton of feedback and not a ton of participation. So I think that in itself is something for us to take away. And I recognize in the September report on engagement that timing and location were issues. So I appreciate that you've highlighted that in the framework, that we need to actually meet people where they're at. Particularly really happy to see the languaging around pop-up events. That's something that I've talked lots about, around going again to where people are at and supporting again the equity deserving groups to participate. I really also appreciate the language that we have here around communicating transparently upfront. This is something that this council has considered, and something we're seeing right now with the federal election is just the deterioration of trust in government institutions, including municipal government. And so I really appreciate that you've spent some time unpacking ways for us to support the public in understanding our processes and ensuring that transparency is at the forefront of all the engagement that we do. And with that, Mayor, with no other questions, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. All right, it's been moved in second. I don't see any questions or comments. So with that, all those in favor? And motion carries. Thanks very much for that. And thanks very much for the presentation this evening. It's much appreciated. You can hang out for the rest of the council meeting if you prefer online. But if you have other things to do, totally understand that. We'll move on to 5.2.1, the official community plan update to meet the BE Bill 44 requirements. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thanks. Long and great discussion around engagement. Another area where we're going to be engaging the community. And I just want to remind council that in addition to these great engagement framework items, we have specific, we may in some cases have specific statutory requirements and or ways that we need to act pursuant to the ever-changing legislation in the province. And Ms. Goddard is going to walk us through this.
Thank you. Good evening. So some of you might be wondering, why are we doing an OCP update at this time? Indeed, we just adopted one in 2022 of July, and many of you will remember that there was quite a bit of consultation at that time. Our previous OCP had been adopted in 2005. So that process was about a 2.5-year process, took place during the pandemic, and again, it had quite a bit of engagement in it. This time around, we're being asked by the province to relook at our OCP and make sure that the land use designations are appropriate for the housing needs report that was presented to you last fall. So this is all part of their Bill 44. Proactive planning is a term they use to describe these new legislative changes. And basically what it means is that all municipalities in BC, just trying to use the arrows here. I don't know if my little clicker is actually working, but yeah.
It looks like a new clicker.
Oh, it's on the side. It's quite basic. Yes, thank you. So what it means is that all communities in BC must update their OCPs by December of this year in order to accommodate those 20 years of housings. Our previous OCP was based on a 5-year housing requirement at that time. And so you can see that obviously 20 years of housing is a lot more than what was previously required. This is actually also quite convenient for us because the census has been released. It was released around the time that our last OCP was being updated, but we've been able to forecast more accurately projection growth just based on the last couple of years of growth. And we can see that our population is growing quite a bit more. So we had thought originally it's more in that 1 to 1.5%, and now it's closer to the 2% projected and observed most recently. And so it's actually a great time to be looking at some of these core questions of population growth and the amount of land use there. And just the reminder, part of the proactive planning cycle is actually after these OCPs have been updated, then we are to be updating our zoning bylaw as well and pre-zoning for that 20 years of housing. And part of that also is getting in the regular cycle of updating our development cost charges, our amenity cost charges tool, should we use one, integrating all our capital plans into our financial plan. So this is all part of that 5-year cycle, which I know that staff have presented on before. I do want to assure that the core values and vision and objectives and goals of the OCP are not recommended to be to change. That vision was informed by quite a thorough process. And so the compass is just here to remind that those values continue to inform the qualities of our community. So just looking at the phases, it is broken into 3 phases. Right now, we are in that background review and the engagement plan, setting it right now. I'll also just say that we hired, we got a team of consultants, B&A Studio Inc., and they're partnering with Applin and Martin on the engineering side of things, and then City Squared Consulting, land economics and development pro forma expertise there. The project scope is targeted, so I'm sure I'm probably saying that in many different ways, but that's really a message to convey right now. And it is to respond to the intent of the legislation and its requirements on that supply of housing and those complete community growth management goals, which you'll recall in December, staff came and brought forward that community growth assessment, which is a study. And now we'll be turning a lot of those findings, refining them, turning them into bylaw. So scope of the OCP update, I'll just cover some of the highlights. Ensuring not only that we have sufficient housing, but also employment lands and also sufficient parkland supply. We're aware as people live in more higher density types of housing, they need better access to public outdoor spaces. Like I said, it's definitely building already on the work of the Complete Communities Growth Assessment that we represented last year. There's quite a bit of work will be done on the policy review respecting each class of the housing needs that's identified in the housing needs report, and that's 7 types of housing needs. We are coordinating with the regional district and member municipalities through the regional growth strategy function on the regional housing action plan. So that work just happens concurrently. There will be a land economic evaluation component to conduct rigorous evaluation of the viability of implementation legislation tools, including inclusionary zoning and density bonusing. So these are tools and powers that we want to test from an economic analysis point of view to understand how appropriate they are for the possible zoning bylaw for the zoning bylaw update that's occurring concurrently to this. Another piece is coordinating the OCP and the asset management objectives as part of infrastructure capital planning into the financial plan. So really enhancing the implementation power of the OCP, establishing local area neighborhood planning frameworks to direct more detailed planning at those local areas, and the downtown vitalization local area plan process that's happening concurrently is an example of that, but there'd be clear policy on when to initiate those plans in other areas. We will be looking at our development permit area guidelines for protection of the natural environment, farmland, steep slopes, wildfire. And as you know, the infill development permit guidelines are currently being, well, there's a public hearing next week on them. And then the implementation monitoring reporting administrative structure will be part of the scope of this work. So just here, looking at these 3 phases of work, some of the key touch points. It's legislatively required that council endorse the consultation plan. So that's why I'm here before you. And so that's the phase 1 here. And then into April and into July, that interest holder outreach begins. And we start the public engagement really in that timeline. And I'm, you know, it's so great to have the city's engagement strategy now informing some of this work. This strategy has been, like I say, informed by it. And so you'll see some of those tools, the pop-ups, which are really great in the summer. People are already out and about. We'll definitely have at least 5 of those. And then a lot of online, you know, now that we use Social Pinpoint, it gives us a degree of interactivity online that we didn't previously have, certainly not the last OCP. So we'll be really leveraging that for community conversations. And then council will hear from us kind of in that summer timeline, end of June, maybe beginning of July, just an interim report. And then really you will be presented with the findings from the engagement in September, the big draft moves of the plan at that time, getting your feedback, and then moving into bylaw process after that, depending on council's feedback. So it is quite a tight timeline compared to the last OCP update. The goals are to inform participants about these legislative requirements. And so really we are in that inform and involve part of the IAP2 spectrum. I just really do want to emphasize that. And staff and consultants are very sensitive to that we have to communicate differently about this OCP update than the one we did the last time, which was a very generative, really looking at everything in it, whereas this one is very targeted review. And so awareness, transparency, those are really important goals. The stage 1, like I said, here tonight. And then just so you know, we've already got our tax insert piece. The notification will go out about our OCP process. That's a lot of residents who will learn about it that way in early May. Social Pinpoint's getting up and running. And KFN, we're starting those conversations on the most appropriate approach for engagement. The stage moving into May, the communication, really, you'll see more of that, you know, really more next month. We'll probably ask you to share with your own networks as well to get the word out, and those interest holder meetings starting. And of course, anytime we have other community events happening, such as the Downtown Vitalization Local Area Plan, we'll be sure to let people know about this. And then June and July, that's when really all those more creative tactics really start. We intend, like I said, pop-ups, online, social, pinpoint, and follow-up meetings with particular interest holders that have identified a need for further conversation. And then August, September, I already mentioned this part, you'll receive an engagement summary and presentation and those big moves and draft plan. And then we're into bylaw adoption process, really the last part of this year. And you will receive a similar presentation from a colleague on the zoning bylaw update in some weeks from now. So you can see how those 2 pieces will be working together. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks so much for the presentation, and yeah, it's good to see this stuff kind of dovetailing together as we move forward. So much appreciated. And first up, we have Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's good that we clarified that we're really just looking to inform people of what the province has told us basically what to do. I'm wondering with the projections, which one do we like best? I assume we're trying to fulfill these future needs. What's our philosophy on trying to figure out what we're aiming for?
Yeah, just so I can have a clarification, are you referring to the growth management framework itself?
I meant the projections of, 3 different projections on
Oh, I
our
see.
growth, and our OCP one looks like it's way lower than what is subsequently perhaps come out.
Yeah,
And-
that's right. So we're using the housing needs report. And so that is the one that is in dark blue there. So the housing needs report is the most recent information we have with the most recent population forecasting in it. So
Okay, great. And so we're really just looking to get this idea out into the community that we want to bring in another, 15,000 people and house them in the valley, or in Courtenay in particular, I suppose.
Well, and I can provide a clarification as well, is that the province through their legislation creates a prescribed methodology for assessing housing needs. So all communities, when they're producing their housing needs reports, will look quite similar and answer similar questions. So yes, this is the number that's anticipated based on those methods. And absolutely, this is the kind of message that we will be conveying to the public, is how this information came to be and what it means for our community.
And just looking at the graph, kind of maybe not quite accurately, but are we on that somewhere on that projection? The blue line, it looks at 2025 to be well over 32,000 people. Are we not below that?
Yeah, we are a little bit below it. I think maybe just the generation of the graph is probably kind of smoothing out some of that detail there. But overall, I think the thing about population projections is that they are indeed projections. We know that can be a bit challenging, but definitely the last couple of years of growth have been more than the OCP last revision anticipated. And so now with these methodologies that have been prescribed, we can get a better sense of ideally, or yeah, probably what the growth will be. But I need to observe a caveat that these projections are actually the whole reason that the province is requiring these 5-year updates, is because we need to continuously be reassessing the data to understand how people are moving to and from our community.
Well, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, it's not necessarily linear as well. And then you can have things like, we're going to have a lot of work happening at the CFB Comox at the base, which is going to bring in a lot of people, some just to work to get things going, and some that are going to be staying, and some are going to be in Courtenay, some Comox, some Cumberland, et cetera. So how that affects all of this is why we have the needs assessment to help us keep on track. So really appreciate that. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. And I just noticed Councillor McCollum's joined us online. Nice to see her here. I really appreciate that we have to do this, and I appreciate that staff will do the best they can. What I worry about is that we went through an extensive official community plan with what I thought was a lot of innovative engagement before we had an engagement strategy. Now we have a highly aspirational engagement strategy, which, much as I agree with all the premises of it, I think demands an awful lot of staff. And I worry that it demands more than we can deliver. I'll give one example. We had a very strong community advisory group around the OCP, which recommended that there be some ongoing engagement. We haven't been able to deliver on that, either in the form that was recommended or even in a modified form. And yet here we are again launching on another set of engagements on an update. So I just think we have to be realistic about how much work is required to bring about meaningful engagement, particularly with elements of the community that don't particularly want to be engaged. They just want us to govern and keep their taxes low and make sure we fill in the potholes on the streets when it's needed. So I'm not trying to be cynical about this. I just think that we have to be practical and realistic, and not expect that our staff are going to be able to work miracles with these sort of processes. So thanks for that.
Mr. Garber?
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to the question from Councillor Hilly. And that's why I talked about, when we have term finite projects and then the engagement engagement strategy overall involves a detailed implementation strategy as well. So we will have to balance those items. And the approach in front of you is to get your endorsement to move forward, which is a statutory requirement. And there's specific items. I just wanted to acknowledge what you're saying though, and we want to do all of those items. The big picture with respect to the engagement strategy and when our senior leadership team came together, that there is that implementation component. So we're trying to achieve those goals, and it is a moving group of activities at this point. We did also advise Comox First Nation about the statutory requirements and deadlines for this work, and they also acknowledged the previous good history of engagement and that balance.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Helene, for that. And hang on one second. I'm looking for the right number here. Miss O'Connell. There we go.
Thank you. And to add on to the city manager's comments, the engagement strategy will not be implemented until we've completed the implementation strategy and council has determined at what service level the department would be resourced to provide that. So any engagement activities that you're going to see undergoing, whether it's through the OCP and the plan that's been created specifically for that approach, or other engagement, it either follows our past practice with some opportunities to incorporate without having that increased capacity draw some of the learnings from the newly adopted engagement framework, or those that are being facilitated by external consultants who have the capacity to dedicate the amount of time and energy to that level of engagement. So in regard to balancing the desire to do engagement at a high service level with our operational capacity and cost, that is absolutely what the next steps are going to be, and the questions will be posed to council as to where that balance is and over what horizon or scope of time you would like to see us achieve the objectives within the engagement strategy. It's definitely not possible to implement overnight and extremely not possible to implement without additional work and resources allocated, because it is ambitious and exciting at the same time, but we want to get it right. So it'll take a bit of time to do.
Thanks so much, Ms. O'Connell and Ms. Wade.
Thank you, through the mayor to council. Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on the fact that there's been a lot of work, and we acknowledge that with the OCP. And the purpose of this update is to understand how we're going to growth manage our housing needs. And that has been clearly identified by the provincial government. We have worked closely with our colleagues in communications in developing this strategy, and that we also have brought in some unique tools that we'll be utilizing in this process. It is a very tight time frame because of the provincial requirements to have this addressed by the end of the year. And that's why this is a very focused approach to the update, so that we can address the 20-year projection for housing needs and the land uses that are associated with it. And we have hired Brown and Associates, B&A Associates, who has a direct communication engagement arm, who's working very closely with not only the development services staff, but also with communication, and we're working together to fulfill the outlines as we move forward in this process.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation from staff. And I want to echo the sentiments that Councillor Hillian brought up about what's realistic and the true cost to actually doing the engagement, in this case, to inform. The question I guess I have is, I notice it's put at $250,000 in the budget for the OCP. I assume that's the update. And I guess the question is, what portion of that is attributed to this engagement piece that we're doing around informing the public? Do we have an idea of what that's costing? And is that included in there, I suppose?
Yeah, I don't have that particular figure at my fingertips, but that is information that we could provide at a future moment. Perhaps the director has a follow-up.
I was going to say, Ms. Wade.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Fish, thanks for that question. The RFP that went out built in the consultation process in with all the other consultants within it. So the proportion of that is based on how we're going to roll out the engagement, because we are informing, but we're also consulting with the community to get their feedback on the growth piece. So I just want to highlight that. There's some two ways going on there. And so as a percentage of, say, the 250, we're probably spending about 35% on the engagement piece.
And if I might just follow up on that, so are you suggesting that there's maybe more of a role for the community to play than just being explained what's happening? There might be a piece where they give feedback and that helps shape our OCP update outside of the provincial requirements?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Fish. Yes, I wanted to, because when I heard just to inform, I wanted to make sure that we understood that there is a two-way, and there will be surveys and being asking for input, like on the big moves and things like that. So there will be a conversation about what that growth looks like and how it impacts and some decision making there.
Okay, thanks. It does seem like more valuable when we are looking for some usable feedback from the community rather than just, spending a bunch of money to tell them what we're doing. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Fish and Councillor Zolliker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And actually my comments, and I think maybe a question, are on the same vein around the engagement. And in particular, we have the management report for development services on the agenda tonight, and there's quite significant work, and I think staff have articulated that. And I think in the management reports, it does speak to at least one project that potentially might be delayed as a result of this work. And so I guess my question is maybe to our city manager or maybe to the rest of the staff team around, and I'm hearing that the consultants are going to be leading most of this work, but we've got comms involved, we've got our subject matter experts involved. Is what's being presented in terms of the impact of this project, in terms of the delays on other projects, are we sure that we've kind of done that assessment? And I guess the reason I'm asking is because I do get curious based on that the primary purpose is inform, and I understand there's interest holder groups that will be consulting developers and landowners on specific components of this update. But there are components such as the pop-ups, which interestingly enough, I'm like the big proponent for the pop-ups, but on a topic such as this, where it's mostly to inform in many ways, the general public that is, I get curious the amount of time and energy that's required for the logistics of 5 pop-ups. I'm just worrying, maybe the city manager, I'd love to hear your thoughts around the impact on our broader work plan for this division, considering it looks like there's already some delays as a result of this work. So,
And Ms. Wade's microphone's already on.
Through the mayor to Councillor Joko, thanks for that question. As you're aware, we've had significant impact because of the provincial regulations on our workload, and have done our very best to adjust to previous workload and strategic priorities. And unfortunately, something like the urban forest, which has been delayed, that was part of the discussions we had around some of the work plan and finances and during the budget. So that piece is being proposed to fall in later on, so that will be moved to 2026. And then there has been some slight impact, like in rolling out the development cost charges update and a few things like that that have required a bit more due diligence on, from understanding the projects and those financial costs a bit more. So we feel that what we've got with our teams that have been hired and the consultants, that we're very optimistic and comfortable that we can carry through with what we have to required for the province to meet the zoning bylaw update and the OCP. I have had discussions with the province, and I can inform you that I asked if there was any possibility that we could have just first and second reading, if that would be considered. But the province was very adamant in the workshops that we had that adoption is to be considered by the end of the year.
Okay, recommendation's been moved, it's been seconded. As Councillor Hilling said, Councillor McCollum has joined us. Unfortunately, the videos were turned off, so she actually joined, I think, over an hour ago, but, and as cameras go on and off, people are, disappear off of our screen, but, and I think there's been some disconnections as well. So, but it looks like we have, kind of everyone at this point, which is nice to see. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And motion carries. And that's recommendation 1. People are going to owe each other a lot of Coke tonight or something. Isn't that how it goes? Coca-Cola? I don't know. Anyways, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions on recommendation 2? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that motion carries as well. And I think that's it. I think we move on to operational services. Thank you very much, Ms. Gothard, for the report, and looking forward to how things shake out. And we will move into Recycle BC Master Service Agreement and Statement of Work. And we have Mr. Thompson, I believe, at the podium. Let me turn that mic on for you. Good to go.
Thank you, Mayor. No presentation. This is just a staff report seeking authorization to renew the 2025 to 2029 Recycle BC Master Service Agreement and Statement of Work for curbside recycling collection. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I know that my question is not specifically related to curbside recycling, but I support us renewing the agreement. I think it's working well. But I'm curious if we're making any progress on expanding the organics pickup in the community beyond just the residential pickup that we currently have.
Thanks for the question. Through the mayor to the councillor. I was just at a regional solid waste advisory committee meeting yesterday. And it is a topic that is part of the strategic plan for the solid waste management plan. It's one of their goals and to increase diversion. So I think they're looking at pilot programs at this time for the future, but it all revolves around what the regional district is willing to accept and how they can adjust their bylaw to accept it.
Thanks. And just for council's information, the reason I ask, I was at a Habitat event yesterday and was approached by the teacher from Courtenay School who, as you know, over 2 years ago approached us about their very active program being included and expressing the frustration that we're not there yet. So, but thanks for at least considering it.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor McCollum online.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for this report. It was well laid out how this agreement, compensates the city to a degree, but obviously doesn't cover all the costs of providing this level of service to constituents. And this issue also came up at the Regional Solid Waste Board as the contract for the Recycle BC depots actually comes a lot closer to compensating for full cost than the curbside pickup. And part of the information that came out of that discussion was that some communities are able to implement their curbside recycling through Recycle BC. In other words, they run the contract and the city doesn't manage it. And I guess it's something that is limited to certain municipalities, depending on where Recycle BC is willing to expand the service. So this is kind of a long-winded question, but should Recycle BC have an opening for more municipalities? Are we not able to express an interest if we've signed another 4-year contract and we're tied in also with our contractor that's providing our waste pickup, or is that something that we would still have as a possibility should the opportunity arise?
Thank you for your question on that. I'm aware of some similar communities that do have Recycle BC handling recycling collection. There's a long history to that, and there's a long history to how the city of Courtenay got to where we are. So I can't really comment on the possibility of changing collectors. But you did bring up that we do have a long-term contract with our current curbside collection provider. I think it may be challenging to get out of that. I can also speak to the levels of contamination that Recycle BC contractors have to maintain are quite stringent. Not that they're any different for the city of Courtenay, but we are given a little bit more wiggle room in terms of contamination and encouragement to get there as a community doing our own curbside collection. So that's about as much as I can answer that question.
Thank you.
And we have an addendum from Mr.
Thank you.
Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councilor McCollum, I concur with Mr. Thompson's overview in terms of service delivery and contract obligations. We do have a significant contract with our current inflow provider. The island is a bit restrictive with respect to those opportunities. They're more common in the Lower Mainland. Maple Ridge is a good example of that. And I would argue that while though it is an option and it would be a full cost recovery as they would be the provider of the service, it is a different and separate service than that of the existing service. So it would be segregated. It would have its own collection cycle. It would likely be not the bin format in terms of a fully automated system. They would likely go back to a more standardized service, which would be source separation at the curb. So it's a quite robust service, and it'd be quite a deviation from where we've particularly taken this service as it stands today with the full automation and the bin purchasing and so on and so forth. So the city's made quite a contributed effort to move in the direction that we have to facilitate a smooth transition into the automated service and then provide the services that we do to our residents at a relatively equitable value with respect to what is currently out there on the market today.
Yeah, thanks for that answer, Kyle. I agree that we've done a lot of work in terms of getting the community on side with how we're doing it. So, I mean, that would be a major trade-off is having to implement another system again to realize, a slight cost savings on what we're not being compensated for. So that's helpful context. Thanks.
If I may just reply, just one more item. It's noted in this contract as well, and this is new to Recycle BC in terms of cost escalations year over year. So there is a CPI, thank you, Councillor, CPI index increase every year. So historically, the contract hasn't seen that. So we'll continue to see those rises in terms of revenue resource. So that'll be articulated in our future financial plans with respect to that service. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just for clarity for me, this new contract, is it outlining increased fees for contaminated materials? Is that kind of the gist of what we're looking at?
There's some changes in the wording of what means contamination. Different products come to market, so they can they always update it, based on different types of plastic films and things like that. There's some adjustments for not only, I think they've raised the level of contamination to more realistic numbers that's allowable, but they've also allowed AAA communities that are getting really low contamination rates a bonus, which is it seems like an aspirational goal, but it's in there as well.
That's kind of what I'm interested in, to be honest. When I just on the ground, when I see people's recycling, it's full of a lot of soft plastics. It's full of a lot of metals, a lot of really weird stuff that we all wish was recyclable, like reusable grocery bags. And then there's a lot of stuff that's maybe really dirty, and I wonder how that fits in. You have your dipping sauce from wherever, and it's still in there. Napkins, that sort of thing. Can you make comments on those, or do we have somewhere we can go as a community to get better at getting that stuff out of there?
Yeah, so the contamination, it's my understanding, is measured by weight. So things like flexible plastics, although challenging and they're always going to be in there, they don't weigh as much. I think a lot of the time what we see is like a load of encyclopedias get thrown in there, completely throws us off the charts. And it's people, I think people are, yeah, they have the best intentions, they just don't quite understand it. In terms of places to go, we're constantly encouraging Recycle to BC to update their recyclopedia. There is a lot of material that's put out that we repost and encourage people along those lines. But we're also managing a 3-stream collection service. So we're looking at challenges with organic contamination as well. Not to get too far off the point, but things like plastic, compostable bags being put in the organics is a challenge. So it's a 3-pronged kind of fight or communication strategy that we're trying to get out to the public on all fronts.
Yeah, I appreciate you outlining it because I don't know if media ever comes to these meetings anymore, but that would be a great story to write. I think a lot of people would read that and maybe have a better understanding of how to do this recycling business, compost as well. And I guess my last question would be, what sort of bonus would we expect if we were a AAA community? If you could guess, or maybe
Off the top of my head, we are not quite close to that bonus, so it wasn't something I memorized. It's a modest increase, and I think it is a reward. But it's one of those things where it's a challenge to get there. I think financially, in terms of communication and efforts, to get to that really low, I think it's something like 3% contamination level that may not pay off the same dividends as we put into it.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and I was going to comment that within the last 10 years or so, we actually were rated the lowest contaminated municipality in BC. So we've been there. So maybe it is not as aspirational, but maybe there's a way back onto that path. But if there's no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And motion carries. We are at the 6 o'clock witching hour for dinner. And I do know that we have a member of council that'll be leaving at 7. So wondering if we do have these bunch of letters in front of us. Looking to council, should we break for a 15-minute and come back so that we're fed, or do we want to try to push through? I'm really just looking at the counselors at this table. What's that? Okay, but yeah, no, and I don't think it would be fair to staff if they have to talk, so and give presentations. With that, 15-minute, we're gonna have a power dinner. So we'll be back quarter after is what is the aspirational goal. All right, we're going to get going in a moment. If those online are able to turn their cameras back on, we'll start momentarily. All right, looks like we have everybody online back there. People finishing their meals. Maybe you can eat off camera, I suppose, easier than we can to a certain extent, or at least myself. But we're going to get back into item 6.1, and that is a letter from the Comox Valley Regional District seeking consent to adopt bylaw number 865. And are there any questions or comments? Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm actually really interested in referring items 6.1 and 6.3 to staff. In part because I think I have lots of questions for the CVRD and they're not here tonight to answer any of them. There's also in some of the correspondence we've received references to details around negotiations, meetings between city administrative officers and at least one reference to a letter from the ministry, all of which I think are really crucial components in the discussion around these two requests and on the impact of these requests on the taxpayers of Courtenay. And so I'm not necessarily sure that we are able to make a decision. And I understand that at least in item 6.1, there's reference to discussions between the city administrative officers, while also simultaneously stating that there's been informal conversations. And so, again, without the CVRD here to answer them, I don't know, and maybe I'd look to the city manager if there's any further details beyond the correspondences that are attached that could be shared around conversations, particularly around impact of what's being requested of the city.
Mr. Garvin.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. So with respect to your question, I wasn't an author of the letter. With respect to any conversations amongst the administrative officers, as outlined in the direction from the board directed that the CEO of the CVRD speak to the staff at the municipalities. I had no direction from council, so could not speak to whether this would be endorsed from our council. The matter was deliberated, and my understanding was a unanimous vote of the board to approach the service review in this expedited fashion. So that's really all I can add to that discussion. My feedback to the discussion was that I don't have direction from our council, and that matter we've deliberated based on what was sent to them. However, given the vote at the board, the representatives of the city of Courtenay supported the process as proposed.
Yeah, and if I can, Mayor, as a follow-up to that, you know, on page 5 of the CVRD staff report, it speaks to the option that we're being requested to consider. And it speaks to some of the unintended consequences of proceeding with this. And I understand that the board has approved it and it's now coming for us for 2/3 participant approval for the removal of the town of Comox. And I guess, you know, it does speak to, and I guess the CVRD staff have identified at least some initial potential consequences of this, of which I have some concerns around, particularly around the impacts to Courtenay taxpayers. And so that's why I would be curious to know if my colleagues would entertain a motion to refer to staff to come back with a report on this item. I'll speak just to this item, particularly around the impact in both advancing our housing plan goals, but also the impact on taxpayers and what the plan might be for City of Courtenay if other participants were to remove themselves, as what's alluded in the staff report, page 5, page 6. So I'll just pause and see if others have thoughts. Thanks.
All right, I do see some hands. Councillor Frisch, you are next up. Did you want to speak to this?
Just quickly, so my question for staff is if we go ahead and endorse this engagement between you and the RD, would it make sense that you might come back with some information for us and share that? I see that they're requesting a response by May 9th. I don't know if that's like the end of their consultation with staff to staff, but what are staff's thoughts on that?
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. I guess I would, so referring this to our staff did not write any reports, nor were we part of the decision-making process, which was the board's direction. So I wouldn't be able to sort of answer that. If council, if I may, I don't want to insert myself in the dialogue, but you could refer it and write to the CVRD with some specific questions, but we don't have the information to answer those questions. I don't know what the financial implication would be.
I'm not suggesting we refer it to you. I'm suggesting we endorse this and you have your chats with staff at the RD and come back and let us know what's going on. I mean, I don't know the politics of this situation. I guess we have 4 members on the RD, so maybe I'll let them speak and let us know. Is that okay? Thanks.
All right. And yeah, I saw more hands, but some more coming back up, but I'll pass it over to Councillor McCullum.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry, just having problems with my mic. Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand why Councillor Jolicoeur has some concerns around this, and I'd just like to make it clear that the decision that was arrived at the CVRD board is based on what options we had after the town of Comox initiated their service review. They have began the process of leaving the service. And so the choice of the board is how we allow that process to proceed. We could go through the service review. It takes up a lot of staff time. And I think I'm speaking for myself, but I think it's a point of view that's shared amongst, unanimously at the board, is that the inevitable outcome is going to be a departure of the town of Comox from this service. So in allowing it to proceed this way, we're simply looking to direct staff to spend their time on something other than a service review for a service that the town of Comox has every right to participate in or not. So while it would be great to see the town of Comox join this, we can't force them. And this is the simplest and most expedient way for us to proceed and keep this process moving forward in terms of establishing an entity to build affordable housing in the Comox Valley. So just to give that context, I don't see what referring this to city staff would yield in terms of useful information at this point. But if there are specific questions around that process that need answering, there's 4 of us on the board that have a pretty good understanding. So I haven't had any questions posed by other council members, but I'm certainly happy to answer them. And I'm sure our chair at the regional district would be happy to do the same.
Thanks for that, Councillor McCollum. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. I would agree with everything that Councillor McCollum said, and the letter that was sent by the town of Comox requested a service review, and it said with the objective of leaving the service. And I think we, around the board table, looked at whether it was worth putting significant resources and staff time from all the communities into a service review where it was clear town of Comox had said that it wanted to leave the service, whether that was a productive use of taxpayers' resources. And I think that the conclusion, obviously unanimously, was that it was not. And rather than try to keep Comox in there against their will and go through a process that might be somewhat performative but still wasteful of resources, the board decided to just move to what Comox was actually asking for, which was to leave the service. It's obviously not what anyone would want. I would want Comox to remain, and certainly that's not for want of discussion and conversations with directors about that possibility. But this is where it's landed, and they have the right to make this decision. And I think we just thought it'd be useful to move forward with their clear objective and allow staff resources not to go towards that, but instead to go towards building the housing authority. So I can understand why this is not welcome news. I don't think it was for anyone, but I think this is the best way of dealing with what was not an ideal situation.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. And I think, and we haven't heard the questions, but my assumption is that they're really around what the implications are to the city. So sort of wearing our city hats, what does that implication mean? And I think I'm paraphrasing, but to sort of the city of Courtenay taxpayers, and maybe there is no implication. Yeah, I'll maybe pass it back to Councillor Cole Hamilton. And I do count, just so you know, in this room, I do have Councillor Frisch and Councillor Joker also waiting. So
I just wanted to briefly answer that direct question. And the answer is that it has no direct impact on Courtenay taxpayers. We're still paying the same requisition we would otherwise. It just means that there's less overall yield from those requisitions to put towards affordable housing. And obviously that's not what anyone wants, but that's the outcome. But there will be no impact on anyone's tax remittances when they see them coming up this summer.
Okay. And I do see Councillor Frisch, you've got your light on, but Councillor Moran, I don't think has spoken yet. So I'm going to just pass it over to Councillor Moran. And Councillor Cole Hamilton, your hand's still up. So I don't know if you wanted to speak a little later as well.
I'm just doing this on my phone. I'll get that down in a second.
Somehow I think you'll be speaking again. So, but I'll let you put your hand down and I'll pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think Councillor McCollum really laid it out, and Councillor Cole Hamilton as well, and clarified some of those questions. I also wanted to add that there was also discussion, because it was a split vote at Comox in terms of, one director was in favor and one wasn't. I mean, not for this final vote, this item, but in terms of the housing corporation. So there was mention of, down the road, Comox may want to join the service, depending on who they have at the table and what they, what benefits they see. So that was also part of the discussion. I just wanted to add.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And back to Councillor Frisch. Oh, I should turn your microphone on. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to thank the councillors for the explanation, and I feel comfortable with supporting the decision, which they've already pretty much made. So happy to move this forward when that's time it comes up.
Okay, and Councillor Zolker.
Yeah, thanks. I guess some the question that I have is really questions that have been laid out in the CVRD staff report, particularly, and again, without understanding who was in these meetings and what was discussed, but it does lay out on page 6 concerns related to consequences of the issues raised by the town of Comox during a meeting are not fully explored. And so, and it mentions further down that those issues could be issues that other participants of the service might have. And so without knowing what the issues are, other than they didn't like that the service was being changed, it's hard to understand, again, what the impact might be for the city of Courtenay. And, are those issues that the town has, issues that the city of Courtenay should be curious around and maybe be asking questions around? And so, again, those are some of the kind of questions left unanswered as a result of not having, and I appreciate that my colleagues who are directors are doing their best to answer, but I think I just would have really appreciated having some representation to be able to provide further information beyond the staff report. But it sounds like there's probably some consensus around the table, so I'll cede the floor. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, and I think one of the things that I think I heard Councillor Frischay, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, was there may be a potential, even if this passes, to send some questions that could then come back to us in the future as well. Since our staff can't really answer those questions, but they could possibly be forwarded on along with whatever the vote results are today. With that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Just for clarity, I think that it would be representatives of the town of Comox that would need to speak to why they chose to withdraw. But based on the discussion that's taken place, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. Oh, sorry. Any opposed? Councillor Jolicoeur is opposed. Moving on to 6.2, the letter from Comox Valley Regional District CVRD request for staff participation in the CVRD regional growth strategy. And I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments. I don't see any lights going. Oh, Mr. Garvin.
Thank you through the mayor. Just anticipating, I'm sorry, there wasn't questions. I just wanted, for council's clarification, we have a standing staff committee that was struck during the direction from the province to create the regional growth strategy, the technical advisory committee, Ms. Wade and I think Ms. Goddard, other members of our development services are the core to that. So although we have extremely large work program in development services, the capacity to support the regional growth strategy function at the regional district level is part of the existing development services resourcing. So I just wanted to let council know that.
Thanks for that clarification. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. And on to 6.3, a letter from Comox Regional District regarding the Comox Valley Housing Entity engagement. And it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think pretty clear what the request is in terms of this really exciting opportunity to participate in the development of what the housing entity will look like. I guess my question is for staff. This, of course, wasn't initially on our work plan. They have attached to their correspondence the detailed engagement plan. Just wondering if staff can speak to what this might have in terms of impact on our larger work plan. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Thank you for the question. The way this has been laid out to us, it's really the creation of the housing corporation itself. It's quite limited. As for the future and how affordable housing units will be developed and that, there's still quite a bit to be discussed as it relates to that. But our understanding is the focus of this work is the corporation itself. And I believe I would likely be the one with advice from our staff to spend some time there, but we would anticipate this not to be significantly impactful. The next round of work related to the actual units themselves, I would appreciate, we would likely have a future discussion about that.
Excellent. Appreciate that clarity. Any further questions or comments from council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? And that passes. Moving on to 6.4, letter from the Comox Valley Transition Society for the change of fiscal host for the substance use awareness event. Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And the Comox Valley Food Policy Council support for local procurement resolution. All right, and any questions or comments regarding that? Sorry, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Comox Valley Food Policy Council's letter in support of our tariff motion a few months ago. I'm wondering, so there are 3 items that they've listed around how the city can support local food systems in addition to the tariff motion. And so I'm wondering if staff have any initial thoughts on that, if this is aligned with some of our other work plan items, particularly I'm imagining maybe the OCP. So I'm wondering if staff can speak to that, or maybe they'll work with the BIA and the chamber. So I can list those items if that's helpful.
Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you. So the 3 items they've asked for is create and support contracts for local food suppliers, encourage restaurants and other businesses to procure a percent target of Comox Valley produced food goods where appropriate, and create a Comox Valley local food first procurement policy. I can speak generally. The community plan, those aren't items that would be part of our review. It has an entire section about food security, but we do not have capacity to be creating and supporting contracts for local food suppliers. The encouragement around businesses, staff can carry that forward at the BIA. I would recommend that the Food Policy Council probably engage with the chamber and the BIA. We don't have any authority to establish a target for that, but we have great engagement with both those 2 entities. And as it relates to the tariff discussion, you know, they're digging deep and working hard together. So I would encourage the organization itself to go to those 2 entities that represent a significant part of our local economy, and then create a Comox Valley local first food procurement policy. We don't have specific policy like that narrowly focused. We have our own procurement policy that speaks in that regard. So we'd need that is something I think based on our current strategic priorities that would be difficult at this point to address, certainly within at least the 2025 timeframe.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And so in the letter, it outlines wanting to come as a delegation, I believe. Do you see any issues with that, receiving that delegation for information and so on? Thanks.
All right, appreciate that. So we're receiving the letter. I wonder if friendly would be to have a response to say via delegation. I don't know if that's something that would happen through staff. Councillor Hillian.
I was thinking along the lines, Mayor, of in addition to respond, encouraging them to present to the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Business Association. I mean, they're obviously welcome to apply to come and be a delegation or not.
Mm-hmm. And there's multiple BIAs, so
yeah,
making sure they're communicating with all of them.
So I'll move the recommendation with the addition that that we write to the Food Policy Council, thanking them for their letter and encouraging them to communicate with the Downtown Business Association and the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. And it hadn't been moved or seconded?
Didn't have a mover and seconder, but we can call that a friendly amendment if everyone's happy.
Okay. I know. I feel the eyes. It's all good. So with that, if there's no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right, and moving on to 6.6, Village of Cumberland Letter of Support for Local Procurement. Excellent. And any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right. And with that, we're going to go on to internal reports and correspondence, starting with Comox Valley Raiders Football Club, Billmore Park Football Tower updates and scoreboard replacement. Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Under section 7.1, we have a briefing note on the status of this great community project. Ms. Saunders is actually here if you have any questions, but we're excited that this partnership can continue to enhance the sports experience at Billmore Park.
And did Joy have a comment or two? We're all good? Okay.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And we'll move into management report 7.2. And maybe I'll open it up to any questions that people have, and maybe we'll just work through it by department, just because, and there may be no questions, but where to go here. But starting with maybe the management report for the fire department. Are there any questions and comments for the fire department? I'll ask one question because I had one. It talked about the, I think it was EDMA, which makes me think of little green vegetables for some reason, but that we're waiting for the province to get back to us. But it said it was supposed to be completed, I think last year, and just wondering if there's an update or if we're sort of just stuck in the sausage maker.
Stuck in the sausage maker.
Okay, so no.
They're working on it. They actually just, they being the province, they've started doing some engagement with CAOs, regional districts and whatnot. But in, talking about that, the product will be coming shortly, but they haven't assigned a time to it at this particular point in time, nor have we seen any documentation. So there is some movement, but nothing concrete to provide at this time.
Yeah, Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, just to build on their fire chief's comments, these big changes to overriding legislation, open burning smoke control regulation, these are really large implications across the province that have service, financial, liability, risk management, all there. And it takes a really long time for them to roll out. It is not surprising that it hasn't finally landed, especially since there are so many things in front of the province at this point right now. And so, we are operating under the assumption that these changes will be put in place, and I believe it's been quite clear to the regional district board through the Comox Valley Emergency Management Service deliberations that there needs to be investments made, and there are resources and staffing and plans that need to be undertaken in that regard. So it is a bit stay tuned, but it's really just given the gravity of the changes, we do need a lot of runway to make sure we're compliant. So this delay, although a challenge, is giving us some time to be prepared.
Excellent. And I wonder, given that runway comment, if adjusting that deadline that's in there, or the anticipated completion date, just because it is in the past, but I don't know, is that a date that the province put on us, or was that one that we sort of imposed?
It was originally one put on by the province, so they would have the information by the end of 2024. They haven't delivered. I can make the change, but then it'll be me setting the date and not the province. So
right.
I'll take direction from council on that.
But they haven't come up with a new date. They're just, okay, they're putting out other fires apparently. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Councillor Moore online.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, just a couple things. Was really happy to see that the breathing apparatus replacement is almost complete. And I had one question around, I know historically firefighters have had a lot of obviously respiratory issues that, they didn't realize years ago how bad an impact it would have. So I guess I'm curious about the equipment now and what we're seeing in terms of the health of firefighters. I'm assuming this is a state of the art kind of apparatus, and hopefully is quite preventative for those issues. So that's one question I had.
Thank you for the question. Yes, the breathing apparatus has improved as technology has changed through the years. That said, it is only part of the respiratory protection program, and more emphasis now is made on getting out of your gear sooner, getting it bagged up so you're not riding in the truck with it in the compartment, more frequent cleaning, better practices of just when, smoke is unavoidable at calls, but moving the locations of some of our activities that don't require breathing apparatus. If the wind shifts, we try to keep people out of the smoke. So it's all part and parcel of a bigger respiratory program. Things are improving, but again, the more plastics and things of that nature that burn, the more chemicals that are released. So it's a bit of, you always got to be moving forward and looking for new ways to protect your respiratory tracts for sure.
Yeah, it really illuminates the kind of the risk that we know the obvious risk for firefighters, but that health risk is really big. So I just always hold my hands up to folks that are doing that work. Just a quick second question, if that's okay, Mayor.
On the fire? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, it was more of a just a way to go. The extrication hydraulic tool replacement. It was great to see that that's moving to electric. And I guess a similar question, have these electric devices been used much, and do they have a good track record yet? Or, because sometimes, there's a question, is the tool going to be as good if it's electric? And I've been hearing that actually the electric tools have been really good in other areas. So I was just curious about that, and happy to see that we're moving to electric with that.
Thank you for the question. We actually have a set of these already on one of our other pieces of apparatus. The tools themselves have performed very well. The issue with the electric tools comes when the batteries start to get older. They don't hold a charge for as long, and therefore you have to swap out the batteries sometimes halfway through an extrication or an evolution. Hasn't happened to us yet, but it has happened to other fire departments. All it means is that you just carry spares on the truck and you just change them out as required. But we do have a set, and the crews have been happy with them. They've actually enjoyed the mobility a little bit because they're not tripping over the hydraulic hose that would be behind the ones that we had previously or still have, or that we're replacing with this upcoming purchase.
Right, that's great. I think these are things too that would be great too. I mean, these are seem like minor things, but I think all of these things added up are kind of good news stories. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Councillor Morin. And next on the list was finance. Or are we just doing receipt for fire?
Oh, sorry.
No. Yeah, in the past, I think they've been separated out, but they're all in one motion. So I figured we'd just talk about each one individually, if that's all right. So moving on to finance, any questions or comments under finance? I did notice that the first few items are at 100%, so that starts off really good. Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just had a question around the direction given in previous discussions around the permissive tax exemption policy. It was, and I may have this wrong, I didn't actually go back and look at it, our past discussions, but I was under the understanding that we would be reviewing that policy like Q2 of this year. But then from looking at this management report, I don't really see an indication that that's what's coming down. And I kind of thought that that was our next big piece of work with this would be landing on how we want to do this. And it seems like the cycle is starting again for the next year. And just trying to understand at what point we're going to provide some new direction because the policy is quite out of date.
Mr. Langmeyer.
That's an oversight on my part. I was actually working on it yesterday. So I can provide an update, and it is my goal to have that to council in the near term.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Adam.
Excellent. And does that mean it'll be on the next management report at 100% or? I'm being aspirational, I suppose, but thanks for the update. And Councillor.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mayor. And just as a follow-up, it was in the previous management reports and it's actually not in this one. So I was also curious because it's just gone missing in this. So I'm happy to hear that we haven't lost track of that work. But as a follow-up, because I also have some concerns because it does mention under operations that the PTE process, our annual process, is ongoing. It started, the letters have gone out. And so I just want some confirmation around when we will receive the report on the policy within the timeline of our annual PTE process.
Ms. Langmeyer.
The PTE process has started and it does take time. If we're wanting to make the changes that council might be hinting at, I would bring the recommendation those changes be phased in. They could be substantial in nature, and some groups may see pretty significant adjustments. So timing and rushing to get a policy in to meet a cycle is not a high priority of me. A high priority is ensuring that we have a good discussion and engagement regarding changes to the policy and how they roll out. So I suspect we could be in a position where we are very status quo for permissive tax exemptions in 2026.
Mr. Garbutt.
Sorry, just to add on that, I mean, ultimately that's council's direction. We need to get that information in front of council. And council will give us that direction. Council has been clear that they want the process to be reviewed. We also had some very specific instances where we had discussion in the community about the permissive tax exemption as well. So we need to get that in front of council as quick as possible so as to provide those options as it relates to the current and future years.
Okay, thanks for that. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just as a follow-up to that, I actually feel like we're already delayed past what I recall we had agreed to for this policy review. And I understand that there's other major priorities like our budget. So I would like to see the policy come back for debate and discussion and community feedback prior to the end of this cycle. Otherwise, we're looking to 2026, which is an election year. And as our staff have indicated, this will likely, depending on what council chooses to do, have an impact on community organizations. And so I am just a little confused because the original, we were supposed to get it Q2, so now for discussion. So I just want final confirmation we will get it prior to the end of this PTE cycle. Like there's room for us to make an in-stream policy change is another way for me to ask the question.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, our chief financial officer has indicated he'll have that report quick as he can through our process to you, and you've been very clear in your comments right now. So,
any further questions or comments on finance before we move on to operational services? All right, operational services, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm straining to see if there's any reference on this report to City Hall. As I'm continually running into people who are expressing their concern about the appearance of City Hall, and I believe that it was scheduled for a facelift at some point this spring once the weather warmed up and painting could actually take place.
Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, thank you for that. To Councillor Hillian. You are correct. I don't believe that it is articulated specifically on this report as it was just identified as an operational item and not met the threshold for capital. So it is in the works and we are planning that work for the spring. So quotes have been received and through the manager of civic properties, Eric Jones, that work will be undertaken shortly.
That's great to hear. So RFPs out, all that kind of stuff. So fantastic to hear. I do have a few questions. I did see the comment around the welcome to Courtenay sign, and I probably mention this every time I see a new welcome to Courtenay sign, that we have the big welcome to Courtenay sign on the Parkway, which is the one that most people see, especially those that don't live or drive between communities on a regular basis. So just wondering, because that one was going to be a little more significant, I think more engagement, and just maybe a heads up on where that's at and what the estimations are.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you are correct. The 2025 program will see the installation of an additional welcome to entry signboard, and that will be on Ryan Road near Anderton. So as you come in from the airport into the community, and the final sign that's scheduled for completion and renewal, which would be next year, would be the one on the main entrance as you articulated into the community, the larger one. As you articulated and as staff understood through the delegation or through the deliberations of budget preparation through capital, that there's some significant influences through our partners at KFN to look at having a much broader and much more engaged sign that is inclusive of some artistic natures with respect to KFN and working with them. So we've started that preliminary process of engagement to seek input and understand what the scope of that could look like with their involvement to bring something quite unique and inclusive into our community.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Mr. Garvin.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, you've raised this sign quite a few times. I just will be very clear that in order to have good engagement and the creation of an appropriate sign, it will take time, and our Courtenay Station has a lot of priorities. So the sign that we have on 29th Street may not be great for Justin McElroy, if he's listening to us in video land, but we need to have adequate time to work on that. It is a priority. It's been mentioned quite a few times that we're aware, but we need to be respectful of the time of that, and I don't want to place any of this at the feet of the nation, but we're working on it, and we will move at the pace that the engagement can do for us. So.
Excellent. And probably the main reason why I brought it up is just it's not mentioned on the report, whereas the other sign is mentioned, right? And so the omittance of it was something that just kind of jumped out at me as well. So and I know nobody's forgotten, but I appreciate the comments. I think that was just, again, great to hear about the electrification of small tools. I think we've heard a little bit about that. And if there's nothing else for operational services, developmental services, or development services, sorry. I had a meeting earlier today with an organization, so obviously it's top of mind. And I don't see anybody with questions or comments about development services. So, all right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, and motion carries. We'll move on to council resolutions, and I'm not sure if Councillor Cole Hamilton says it or if another councillor has to. And it will be Councillor Frisch. Thank you, Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I see Councillor Cole Hamilton speaking, but I guess he's muted. Would you like me to read this out in its entirety?
I believe it has to be per the rules.
Whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities represents the interests of member municipalities on policy and program matters that fall within federal jurisdiction, and whereas FCM's board of directors is comprised of elected municipal officials from all regions and sizes of communities to form a broad base of support and provide FCM with a united voice required to carry the municipal message to the federal government. And whereas FCM's annual general meeting will be held in conjunction with the annual conference and trade show, followed by the election of FCM's board of directors. And whereas the UBCM FCM Small Communities Travel Fund covers airfare, hotel, accommodation, and ground transportation expenses related to attending FCM board and standing committee meetings other than the annual general conference. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the City of Courtenay endorse Councillor Will Cole Hamilton to stand for re-election on FCM's board of directors for the period starting in May 2025 and ending June 2027. And be it further resolved that the city assume all costs associated with Councillor Will Cole Hamilton attending FCM's board of director meetings that are not covered by the UBCM FCM Small Communities Travel Fund.
Somebody could second.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Morin. Appreciate that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right, moving on to bylaws. First, second, and third readings. We'll start with the 2025 tax rate and financial plan bylaw amendments. If somebody could second it.
Second.
Or do we want to speak to it first? I think I heard Councillor Cole Hamilton second it, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Juliker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just in review of this amendment in our previous discussions on the 6th Street Bridge, we had had some questions for staff around the opportunity at this stage, at the bylaw amendment stage, to look at reassigning growing community fund allocation. And so I know we've spoken to a few councillors and to staff around some options for us to consider. But I think in part, one of the concerns that I continue to have, obviously, is the impact on long-term debt for that project and some of the constraints that we have for growing communities. I think there are a few items, particularly under the affordable housing allocation, the fire hall, and McPhee Meadows projects that I think some of which we have some timelines and others that we don't. And so yeah, I guess I'm curious to explore the opportunity to use this item 9.11 to further amend the financial plan to have a staff report to come back to assess the viability and the feasibility of being able to reassign some of the funds previously allocated to other projects. So I think that I'll leave it at that and love to hear other people's thoughts. And I know that I had previously asked staff to support with a motion. So if that's helpful, we can maybe see if we can put that on the screen as well. But love to hear others.
We do have a mover and seconder, so we have a motion on the table. So we might be looking at either rescinding or but maybe while we're caucusing, I'll pass it to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I might have missed that. Which expense were you looking to have the funds reassigned for?
Yeah, this is building on our conversation a few meetings ago around the reallocation of growing community funds to reduce the taxpayer burden of the 6th Street Bridge.
The 6th Street Bridge. Okay,
yes.
Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, an amendment might be a way to go there, and I think maybe one question that I would have to staff is in the direction that we gave back then. We were coming back, I believed, in May or after May to talk about lots of financial stuff, but this is giving very clear direction under one thing. So I'm just but with that, I do see that Councillor McCollum has put her hand up, but I'll cede the floor to her.
Thanks, Mayor. Just real quick, perhaps Adam can add some clarity here. I thought the information that was relayed from staff when we raised this was that we would have the opportunity to make a decision on the aspects of borrowing for the bridge when the borrowing bylaw comes back. So in looking at this, I just want to be clear before I vote that we could adopt it as drafted currently, and we would still have the opportunity to make that change and move growing communities money to the 6th Street Bridge project in order to reduce the borrowing, even if the bylaws pass. That was what I understood from the information at the last meeting, but maybe we could just have that laid out one more time so council is clear one way or the other.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum and Mr. Langenmeyer.
So working from the direction given by council at the March 12th council meeting, is to prepare a loan authorization bylaw for the $4.3 million needed to fund the shortfall of the bridge. To do that, I need to update the financial plan, increase the value of the 6th Street Bridge project, show the loan authorization or borrowing as the funding source. Once we have that financial plan adopted, then I actually have the authorization to create a financial or a loan authorization bylaw. During this time, I can bring the loan authorization bylaw forward and say, hey, is this what council wants to do? I'm asking you to do it. And at that point, if council has received different information from what occurred at March 12th and through the process of getting here, council can give direction to amend the financial plan in a different way to do what they see fit.
And is there an ETA for that boring bylaw to come back? Like, I just, when I was hearing Councilor McCollum talk, it was sort of like, what does that runway look like from here to there?
So with the time constraints of the project, the boring bylaw was a high priority. There are certain construction windows that needed to be met. Engineering can talk about that much better. However, once I have this amended financial plan, then I can bring the bylaw back at a very soon meeting after that. Because the actual creation of a loan authorization bylaw is relatively simple to get to council the first time, but it is a lengthy process to get it authorized and actually in force.
Okay. Appreciate that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mr. Langmeyer for that information. I'm comfortable with the current process.
And Councillor Juliker.
Yeah, thanks. So on page 2 of the staff report that speaks to the financial plan amendment bylaw that's in front of us, it does speak to notable changes. There's 6 bullets. That includes the 6th Street Bridge capital project change by $4.3 million. So is this not the bylaw with the amendment of the increase to the bridge that you're referring to in your response? Like, is this not the moment where we would, in fact, make an additional amendment to reallocate? Because you're making the change for the bridge with this bylaw.
Mr. Langmeyer.
That is correct. So in the financial plan bylaw, we must increase the value of the project. And this is where council actually gives a legal authority for staff to spend. So if council does not approve the amended financial plan, even though we have a contractor ready to go and a project ready to go, we actually can't spend. We can only spend up to what's included in the existing financial plan. So what we have to do is we have to amend the financial plan bylaw, get the authorization to spend. The next step, that gives me authority to bring you a loan authorization bylaw to take the loan out. At that time, council can give direction to something different than what is in the current financial plan. What I'm trying to do is ensure that we have a path forward that will get us the funding we need for a bridge. If that path is borrowing, which is what we have at the time in front of us, that we start that process as soon as possible, given the length of time it takes to have a loan authorization bylaw created and accessible, which is several months. If we create a loan authorization bylaw, council does not actually have to act on it. You can have a loan authorization bylaw passed and approved. You can say, hey, I don't want to take that debt out. Let's use some other source of funding to complete this project.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think this is really where in the timeline of all this that this happens. And given that we have just had a pretty lengthy debate about the 6th Street Bridge, my preference is for us to include the amendment at this stage rather than in the loan authorization. A lot can happen between now and then. And I appreciate that the loan authorization is there if we need it for capital. But that at that point is at the discretion of staff once we've signed that over, the loan authorization. Is that correct?
No, council has the authority to, you're the only folks that can actually say, let's take out debt.
But once we approve that, it sits there for us to be able to use when needed.
That's correct.
At staff discretion. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I would prefer to reduce the budget at budget time, which is now, rather than at a later date. I think when we communicate out to the public generally, and this is probably my last comment, Mayor, around our financial plan, I would appreciate, and I think I'm in favor of being able to communicate to the public that we've actually reduced the total taxpayer costs for this specific project. I think it might get lost in a loan authorization. People are probably not paying attention to a loan authorization bylaw 4 months from now, but people are very curious about our financial plan, and there's been a lot of community feedback on this particular project. And so, yeah, I would be in favor of making an amendment at this time rather than at the loan authorization time. And I'm happy to move that motion. I don't have it in front of me, so I know staff helped with some language, but obviously I need a seconder, so.
Mr. Garvin.
I'm sorry, I just want to respond. So just through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, I just want to be clear. You'd referenced staff discretion. We wouldn't utilize utilize access to funds through a borrowing bylaw without notifying council. So I just want to be clear. I think I maybe misunderstood what you were saying, but what our chief financial officer was saying was that we don't necessarily have to access that. But I just want to be clear. If council was aware of our path forward and then we did end up accessing funds, that would come for information to council in that regard.
Okay. I don't see any further, oh, there we go, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. So could we not pass this and then Councillor Jolicoeur could make a separate resolution to have staff look at options for the Growing Communities Fund? So that, as he says, then it would be on the record that we are looking at reducing the costs that way. Could it be a subsequent?
Mr. Garvin.
Through the mayor, that can happen. And then subsequent to that, we'd like to get, I think, some direction in that regard. And then if it required a future amendment to the financial plan, then that would be undertaken as well. So if I understood correctly, the question, if I could restate it, pass the motion and then make a subsequent motion to refer it to staff for additional information, and then come back to council, and then council could look to amend the financial plan to incorporate those changes.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's what I was trying to convey. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks to staff for pulling up language that would be supportive. So I guess there's two potential amendments. The amendment of the motion on the floor, which includes first, second, and third. So we would amend that to just be first and second. And then the second motion, which would ask staff to go back and do the work on unspent growing community funds. And so I'm happy to move the first amendment to the motion on the floor to read first and second only and not first, second, and third.
Councillor Frisch.
Would it be fair to call the question at this point?
I don't see a seconder for the amendment. So seeing no seconder, we'll call the question unamended. All those in favor? And any opposed?
Sorry, Mayor, I was trying to get my hand up before that because I had a clarification question, but guess I'm too late now.
Okay, yeah, sorry. And always feel free to interrupt if you need to. I know technology is challenging at best, and some microphones have been left off or on, I should say. So we've had to mute them as funny noises were coming from Zoom land. So apologize for that too. But that being said, yeah, Councillor Jolicoeur was opposed. And I mean, at this point, there was an option for a subsequent as well, but Councillor Moore, what do you need clarification on?
Well, I guess I was curious why that motion was proposed to leave out third reading. Because I thought that the two or the second motion was fine the way it was. And then this one.
Yeah, it's just a technical matter that amendments would be the first and second, and then it would come back for the third, I believe, if I'm. Yeah, so you can't do an amendment. Yeah, I'll let our clerk, Ms. Proton, articulate it far better than I can.
Amendments need to be done prior to third reading. So if you gave third reading and then you had amendments, you would have to rescind third reading and give new third reading with amendments.
Um, I, yeah, sorry, I'm still not really following. I think the Zoom is complicating things for me, but so is that second motion not we're not considering that, or would I have to anyway? I'll let
Council
somebody
can,
else jump in.
council can certainly make another motion. I believe that staff drafted it that way. So that if there were any amendments to the bylaw, you wouldn't have to go through the process of rescinding third reading, making amendments to the bylaw and giving new third reading. So that that makes the process smoother to make amendments prior to third reading if you don't already give third reading at this point. Council is welcome to make a motion like that, and I can put it back on screen if that's helpful.
But we do have a motion that passed, so that to me.
Yeah, no, I don't have I don't have a problem with what's on the screen right now. I was just didn't understand why. Anyway, go. That's fine.
Okay, and Councillor Jolicoeur, did you have a follow-up?
Well, just a point of
motion?
order around
Yeah.
what was the result of that vote?
So that vote was, what's that? Yeah, it was carried.
Okay, so thanks, Mayor. I'd like to, if we can pull that motion back up on the screen, I'd like to move that council direct staff. I'll just wait because you guys have pulled the nice language together. Direct staff to prepare a report assessing the feasibility and financial implications of reallocating any unspent growing community funds from the following 2025-2029 financial plan. Can you scroll up? Capital projects to the 6th Street Bridge project, and it lists all the growing community projects.
And at this point, third reading's already been done, right? Based on the motion that was already passed. Right. Just because in the title it said defer. Oh, right, yes, and that's the part you deleted, right? Okay, so I'll just ignore the title. Okay. That being said, we do not have a seconder. All right, so with that, we're gonna move on to somebody. Sorry,
I was trying to second it, but anyway.
If that's your intention, we haven't started a new item, so okay. It's now on the floor for discussion. Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I appreciate the intent of the motion to find some perhaps alternative funding for the 6th Street Bridge project. I happen to be really comfortable with the options that we already have without this motion to look at that after we get our borrowing bylaw sorted out. It sounds like there's not going to be anything stopping us from changing the funding sources, if that's what I'm hearing from our Director of Finance. And so I don't think we need to go this route. And in fact, when it comes back, we can always ask our financial department what some other options are if we don't want to take out the full amount. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch, and Councillor Moore, your mic is still on. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to the motion, but I do have Councillor Jolicoeur. Are you okay? Okay, so Councillor Jolicoeur is going to cede the floor. Councillor Moore, if you'd like to speak to.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I seconded this because I do get that we can do this later, but I'm trying to support Councillor Jolicoeur's intention of getting this out there so that publicly we are looking at options for reducing the costs. So that's why I seconded it. Even though I know that we can look at this later, I just think that if we're going to look at it later, then we may as well do the report sooner rather than later, I guess. That makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Moran. And Councillor Jolicoeur is saying that he's already spoken, so I'll pass it over to Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of us having a discussion around this when the loan authorization comes back. It is a staff report, and I think we've been fairly clear that we have an interest in looking at reallocating. I also want to be clear, though, that we cannot reduce the cost of this project. We've already agreed to the price, which was part of the hesitancy, so we can change the funding and we can limit the borrowing to a degree, but the costs are now set. So as long as we have the opportunity to look at this and how we can use, if there's a desire to use growing community funds when we do the loan authorization bylaw, I just don't see the value beyond maybe optics to have staff come back and prepare a separate report if we're able to receive this information at the next step in the process. So I'm just going to ask our CFO again if this is something that can be included for as part of the council decision making when the loan authorization bylaw comes back.
And Mr. Garbett has a comment.
Yeah,
as well.
sorry. Mr. Langemeier is more than capable of answering it. I mean, ultimately, what I'm hearing, you could change this motion to have the report or that information come back with the loan authorization bylaw. Sorry, I'm kind of repeating what you were just saying, Mr. Langemeier.
For those online, we're getting nodding heads. Mr. Langemeier, I don't know, he's concurred, if you can trust me, I guess. Yeah. With that, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I think in part, the timing of this is really what I'm concerned about. I mean, we just had a presentation on engagement, on the importance of building trust and community. And I think this conversation about the 6th Street Bridge is top of mind for a lot of residents of Courtenay and broadly in Comox Valley. And so that's why my preference was for us to have this tabled now. And with the timing, I'm not sure what the timing would be for the loan authorization bylaw to come back. I also understand that we are planning some communication around the 6th Street Bridge more broadly. And so that's in part why I'm hoping that the timing aligns with that planned communication so that we can communicate the total tax burden on the citizens of Courtenay. And I think by potentially looking at this as an option that we'll be able to reduce that. And that I think would be a really valuable component of any communication around the 6th Street Bridge. So I guess my question to staff is, do we have a timeline on what that 6th Street Bridge communication plan looks like, and how that might impact the work on the loan authorization?
Point of order, I don't know that our engagement strategy is really part of this. I think we're really getting off track here. I don't want to spend more time than necessary. And getting an update on the engagement strategy at this point, I think, is getting us into the weeds.
All right, my call. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the engagement strategy is something that staff are working on, and council has the ability to communicate out as well. Councillor Frisch.
A question for staff. If we pass this motion, how much does that change what you plan on doing anyway?
Like, were they already planning on doing
Yeah.
this, or is this expediting something, that kind of thing? I don't, does that make sense, Mr. Langemeier?
When I bring a loan authorization bylaw, in that report, I can look at alternatives. My approach for situations like this is to rely on debt until the project is complete. And we use a temporary borrowing, which is accessing funds like a line of credit. Once we have the project completely built out and we have money sitting on the line of credit, at that point in time, it's really easy for council to make a decision on how much of reserve funds or other funds they want to use to bring down the total amount borrowed to complete the project. Preempting that conversation, it can restrict us a bit. If the project comes in more than anticipated, we've given up the ability to access funding and we've pre-spent some of our reserve funds. So the balance of using cash and debt really allows for the most flexibility in construction when there's some uncertainty of the final price. So my recommendations is to try to make a balanced approach to use of debt and to the use of reserves. So when we get to the end of the project and we are either over or under, we retain flexibility to complete or knock down the total amount of debt taken on and save interest expense over the next 20 or 30 years.
I think I understand that explanation, but I'm not quite sure how this motion will change that flexibility.
This motion will bring a little bit of additional information with my loan authorization bylaw.
Okay, well, I'm happy to support it if that's what it does. Thanks.
All right, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right. And that brings us down to 9.1.1.2, the 2025 tax rate bylaw 3179, 2025. Excellent. And are there any questions or comments on this one? And I'm not seeing any lights or hands go up. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? And motion carries. And moving on to 9.1.1.4, the water service frontage, sewer. I've jumped ahead one. Sewer service frontage tax amendment bylaw. Somebody like to move that? Okay. And I'll probably be looking to the two people in this room to move and second many of these things. Any questions or comments regarding the sewer service frontage tax? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And moving on to the water service frontage tax. And are there any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. Loan authorization bylaw 3183 for strategic land acquisition 2025. Oh, been moved and seconded, Mr. Garbett.
Sorry, I just want to clarify this loan authorization has nothing to do at all with the 6th Street Bridge project, just for clarification. Thanks.
Okay. Yep. We're alternating between the two councillors in the room so far. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Getting back on any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And looks like, and any opposed? I don't see anybody opposed. And we'll move on to 9.1.3 municipal enforcement bylaw adjudication. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Zolliker?
Thanks, Mayor. I do have, I'm really happy to see this come forward, really happy to see the expedited timeline from the province with the election and swearing in of cabinet. I know that staff have done a lot of work around this and I'm really happy to see this come forward. I do have a few questions, Mayor, if you'll indulge. The first one being, I'm trying to ensure that I understand this appropriately. So really the staff report does a great job of explaining our new approach that's being proposed, particularly around the BDAS system for fines. And so my first question, it appears the maximum allowable contravention fine under the BDSS is $500. And so is that statutory? Is that policy? Is that something that we have an opportunity to influence? That's my first question.
All right, Ms. O'Connell.
It is statutory and we cannot influence it. Anything above 500 would be covered under MTI.
Okay, thanks. And my next question is in the bylaw itself, which is attached to the report, it speaks to Appendix A and Appendix B, which are the total charges under each section of contraventions. And I know that we've previously, through our budgetary process, our financial plan process, had set a motion in place for staff to review fees and charges. And I know there's lots of fees and charges that the city has. And so I just would like clarity that these amounts will be reviewed as part of that process. And if not, if staff require further direction for that to be included in that review.
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. The reporting back in regard to the options to increase revenues through things like adjustments to fees and charges. Likely what my response would have been from the bylaw side was that it is possible to look at increasing or gaining some revenue through things like the tickets and that approach. At the same time, it likely wouldn't be the piece that I would recommend would result in the largest amount of revenue. There are a lot of other areas, particularly within bylaw, if you just consider things like parking fees and things like that, that would be much more revenue generating than making adjustments. Some of the things to consider when you are adjusting fees are what's that fine balance between the penalty or the impact of the penalty of the fee and someone's ability to pay it, and how many it may actually end up in adjudication, or we may end up, if the fees are too high, with all of our tickets being disputed, which can cause other challenges for bylaw enforcement. At the same time, we would also need to be looking at what are other cities charging for their penalties and how in a line or out of line are we with those. But then ultimately at the same time, even though this bylaw consolidates the penalties for all city bylaws for the most part, is that a lot of the fees or the penalties are based on what the objectives of the bylaw are. So if the objectives of the bylaw are to prevent something with a really strong hand, then those fees would be adjusted based on the objectives of that policy perspective. So it's really challenging to do it blanket unless the policy objective is solely to raise revenue. Then that is very different. So this is something we can look at, and I can bring it back, and I don't need further direction on that piece to have it included. But just to give an early indication, there's other options that may be more suited to revenue generating than this. And if it's a question as to whether or not our fines are changing people's behavior, this is only one tool in a suite of tools to address non-compliance. So we can layer things. So we can issue tickets under bylaw adjudication. We can issue tickets for the same infraction under the MTI if it's more significant. We can still pursue long form prosecutions, which gives us we can seek up to $10,000 in penalties and fines. And even beyond that, especially when it comes to things like businesses that are repeatedly non-compliant, there are additional options under the Development Services Department's delegated authority around temporary suspension of business license and or revocation. So essentially, if it's about not revenue, but about effectiveness, this is one tool. And this really is the tool that would apply to 99% of the folks out there who, they get a ticket, they pay it, they change their behavior. And others, we still have that whole suite available to us.
Yeah, and thanks for that, because I really appreciate that when we're reviewing fees and charges that we have to consider comparators and the balance. And the context, I think, around adjudication, I think is really important. And I really appreciate you mentioning that last piece, because that I think is where my thinking was going, particularly under the MOTI or the MTI Appendix B items. I saw some of those numbers and I was really, I guess, curious to know if this is actually making a deterrent, or are we actually supporting the behavior not to occur with these amounts. So I appreciate learning a little bit more around the different avenues that the city has to deter that bad behavior. So with that, thanks, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. I don't see any further questions or comments. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? And motion carries. And we'll move into second and third readings for the downtown Courtenay revitalization. Okay, it's been moved in second. Any questions or comments regarding revitalization? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, and for adoption, traffic regulation amendment bylaw 3172. And any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And we'll get into council reports. Councillor Cole Hamilton. He's good. Councillor Frisch. Councillor Hillian's not here. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to speak to two items, myself and many other councillors attended the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities annual conference 2 weeks ago. It was a great AGM, and a lot of local Vancouver Island issues are being advanced at the provincial level at UBCM. So really happy to see that. And we got to spend some time really understanding some of the success stories around housing and homelessness, including some examples that were shared around the city of Courtenay, and that was shared with our colleagues across the coastal communities. So I just wanted to share that. And then lastly, the Comox Valley Food Policy Council is engaging in a Buy Local campaign. And so that will be also launched. And as a follow-up to an item that was raised to all the electeds at that table, there will now be a bus stop for the farmers market this season. So some good news coming to those who attend the bus market, the farmers market, and wanting to go via bus. Thanks.
Excellent. Although I don't know, a bus market sounds pretty exciting too, but I drive a school bus, so I suppose maybe I'm more interested than others might be. Councillor McCollum.
Pass.
And Councillor Morin.
I'll generally pass, but I just want to give a correction to Councillor Jolicoeur. I don't think the bus is going to be actually up and running for this season. So unless there's a rejigging of things, but it is coming, but maybe not for this season.
So maybe a bus market is our only option for this year. Fair enough. Basically just yesterday, along with Councillor Hillian and City Manager Garbett, attended the Habitat for Humanity key ceremony with a new family moving into the Habitat housing, which was a great ceremony as always, and also attended a tariff leaders meeting today with led by Minister Josie Osborne and attended by elected officials across Vancouver Island. So good stuff there. And with that, we'll move into the in-camera if somebody wants to do it. All right. All those in favor? And motion carries.
We have a different Zoom link for that meeting just before.
There is another Zoom link, so hopefully you guys have that ready to go, and we're going to kick you out now.